welcome to planning meeting, commission meeting tonight, February 3rd, 2016. Looks like we got a full agenda and quite a few people, so welcome. We'll go ahead and start tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and can I have Commissioner Fallon start us with that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Today we will address the first item on the agenda, which is item 3 for those that have the agenda, which is a conditional use permit. It is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and discuss with the staff first and then open up the public hearing. This will be for the AT&T cell tower modifications, and I'd like to invite Mr. Anderson to brief us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Commissioner Nielsen has to be excused tonight. I don't know if you knew that or not, so let me mention that. We sure appreciate him letting us know in advance. Your agenda is fairly full, so I'm going to be as quick as I can in going through things. With all of the items on the agenda, please feel free to ask any questions that you have. Ask me to slow down and talk things through, but at least for my part, I'm going to try to be pretty succinct. And then I do have a couple of things when we get done with the agenda items that I'd like to run by the commission right fast. So that being said, AT&T proposed conditional use. It's an existing tower. AT&T has equipment on the tower already. They simply would like to exchange that existing equipment or some of it with new equipment, and given that the new equipment will be a little bit larger than what they have there now, our typical rule of thumb is that if you're putting something bigger on, then we bring it back to the commission for you to review the conditional use. That being said, without the idea, like we mentioned before, of companies using existing towers versus constructing new ones, and we don't believe that the new equipment that will be installed here, would be installed here, would pose any kind of problem for the surrounding area or create any kind of a detrimental impact on surrounding property. So the Development Review Committee has recommended that the proposed conditional use be approved.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Is the height changing at all? Is that...
Yep.
Okay.
So we have a few of these around town. No big changes from what we've already have in other locations. Does any member of the commission have questions before we open up for a public hearing? No questions? Okay. This time I'd entertain a motion to open up the public hearing for the AT&T tower.
So moved.
And at this time I'd like to open the meeting for the city meeting. Is there anybody that in the audience that would like to approach the commission in reference to the AT&T tower? Let the record show that there was nobody here for public record to discuss the AT&T tower. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. And at this time, is there any member of the commission that has questions or would like to make a motion for the approval or recommendation, excuse me, to City Council for the AT&T tower?
I would move that we approve the modifications on the AT&T tower.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Go second.
I'll second.
Go Tracy, it's all you. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Tanner.
Aye.
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 Okay. We will go to the next item on the agenda for the night, which is preliminary plat and zone change. This is for the Bridle Creek preliminary plat, and we'll go ahead and listen to Mr. Anderson in reference to it.
Once again, thank you. So the subject property here is just east and a little bit south of Maple Mountain High School. So Maple Mountain High School is located here. on this image. This is 2550 East. You'll likely recall that we approved a couple of subdivisions this past year for properties that are immediately north. Canyon Crest, I believe, is one. Maple Mountain Estates is another one that's just north of this property here. And in short, with the Stillman annexation that happened here, now I guess about 18 months ago, plans were developed to deliver infrastructure to this part of the community. Essentially, the east side of 2550 East, the big deficiencies that we had, and we sort of still have until some construction is finished, had to do with being able to provide power and sewer service to properties, again, east of 2550 East. But given that those issues have been addressed, construction work's underway to get I believe actually to get both the power and sewer service provided for this area. I think this is one of several other development proposals that you'll likely see for this area in the next few months and years. This particular project is on a site that's currently zoned R115, which I just want to take a moment to talk about. Right now, everything that we have in the city that's west of 2550 East is zoned R112, and everything that's north of First South here likewise is zoned R112. And when this property was annexed with others, it was decided at that point in time that First South and 2550 East probably were good lines of delineation for that break between R112 zoning and R115 zoning. So this development that's proposed meets our regulations for master plan development in the R115 zone. And I touch on that just as we look at annexations and zone change proposals for this part of the community in the future. Unless something changes, it'll be staff's recommendation that those properties be zoned R115. We've talked before about there being something of a deficiency in the community of just a little bit larger lots for single-family homes. And the general plan suggests certainly that this is the area where it makes the most sense to plan for a little bit lower density, a little bit bigger lots. And again, this proposal here with this preliminary plat, 36 lots, a little bit different than what we have on that image. It does fit within the density parameters that are provided with that R115 zone. For a master plan development, staff and the applicant went through a few different iterations of designs to make sure that we were adequately planning for street connections to neighboring properties. And we believe that with this layout, eventually there will be a functional, just local street network developed, and that things really should have a neighborhood feel in that part of the community. So staff's recommended that the proposed preliminary plat be approved.
Can you discuss a little bit about the traffic flow? I noticed under the current development, I know things will work eventually, but you know, we've only got one entrance, and I realize I think it's acceptable for one until you get over 50. Is that 50 dwellings?
Standard, yeah.
The standard. Do we have concerns from the fire department or any other utilities as far as the current layout?
Great question. No, given that the existing streets, the way they're designed, they don't exceed any of the maximum length requirements that our fire department uses for things like streets on cul-de-sacs or any dead-end stub streets like we have here and there. So this should work very well for them should they enter the neighborhood and need to exit. They shouldn't have to put a vehicle in reverse or anything like that. And you know, with a property that's configured like this, with only this much existing frontage on a public street, the access is a challenge. So the thing that we really try to focus in on is what the development potential is on adjoining properties. And frankly, I would anticipate that, with the exception maybe of some property that Rocky Mountain Power owns in the area, all of the surrounding properties at some point in time will develop. So we just want to make sure that we have planned for streets at a functional interval with those neighboring properties, so that as they're developed, we have a network of streets that, for example, allows somebody to get from a home that might be here someday to a home that's over here without needing to go over to 2550 East and up to First South and down. So we want to make sure that we have those connections. on a very local scale to just make that traffic system work.
Yeah, this label is 100 south. I think it's actually 150, isn't it? 150 south?
Sure. Is it 100?
Yeah. This is a tricky road. It's kind of a sidebar to this thing, but maybe it's something we need to look at in the future, because as all these developments take place, this road here is pretty treacherous, and I understand there's some challenges there because you have, you know, you got Spanish Fork City, you got a little bit of county, and then you got Mapleton all on one little road, and it's gonna affect that road right there, so maybe something we need to look at, maybe not in this meeting, but down the road, and you probably already are, but there's gonna be some challenges on that road.
Well, like I think I've said before, we talked about this a lot on 2550 East, that development just north of Macon Mountain High School. And one of those things where I don't think a good solution exists. Things typically will get worse as traffic's added to a road like this with development, like what we're talking about here, but at the same time, it's this type of development that builds that road, that expands it.
There's only about probably 100 feet right here that's county, right?
On the south side of the road, I think this is the city boundary here.
I think it goes all the way to here.
Right.
Oh,
So we still have, we'll talk about an annexation
I thought
here
it was
a
this
little
one.
bit later. So there's still a good part of that that's county. But for example, we can see here, when this property develops, all of that frontage gets improved, and at least part of the situation that you're talking about
right.
is improved. But there will be periods of time, probably in some cases lengthy ones, where you have those gaps and things, and of course they are a problem.
That road's closed right now, is that just for utility work?
Yeah, maybe the big picture, there's a sewer line coming up through here that will service this development, and it'll extend to Mapleton as
So
well.
we're just working on that.
About a month time frame there.
Has the right-of-way for the power lines been considered in this plan?
We had discussion in DRC about this corner lot. The developer's gonna get with Rocky Mountain Power to look at clearances, and that more than likely, this lot will have to get bigger, combine something along those lines, just to make sure there's a buildable area.
And then the setback on these two homes here is sufficient for getting in and out of that area?
Yeah,
It just seems like that's congestion right there.
on a local road, that's sufficient. We will, as the homes come in, look at the driveways and ensure they're on the
South side.
south side furthest away as possible.
Any questions from members of the commission?
Got a question, and my pointer's not working.
Use mine.
Thank you. This area here, it looks like they've designed that to maximize their lots with that right of way, that power line right of way.
This is actually an old layout.
It's not the
So
latest.
is that, that's not the way it's gonna be?
But, yeah,
So
I'm
this
just wondering-
road here has been moved, so this will be a four-way intersection here, and the road abuts, this will be a city park right here. So this road is moved over here to abut the park.
What I was wondering is if this dead space here and here, if this property could be better developed to utilize that right of way it's gonna be, to create a dead space right here and here. From, you know, I'm sure they don't wanna buy more property, or
Right.
maybe they can't, but it seems like the problem down the road compared to that, at least that illustration up above, they've maximized that, put them homes right up against that.
Because of
What's
the power line.
What's some thoughts about that?
Well, it gets difficult for us to require developers to do that, and it's a tall order for somebody in a case like this, where the neighboring properties aren't even in the city yet, to be able to put a plan together to include those in the development, and just work through the different things that would need to happen, for us to be able to consider approving
It's a county property.
this as part of this project.
Yeah.
What you're saying, I think, makes all the sense in the world, that this really is the opportunity to functionally plan for the development of properties like that.
yeah, 10, 20 years, what's it gonna look like? Will this be,
Right.
nobody can use it.
And the best thing that we could do at this point in time, I think, is to make sure that we're at least allowing for some access to that property. But again, I think your point's great. I believe we even talked with, I know we've talked with other property owners about trying to get with neighbors. And a lot of times through here, it is Rocky Mountain Power that owns. I don't know that that's the case right here.
That is,
They do own
Rocky
that one.
Mountain Power owns that and that. And so they're not really.
Which is another challenge.
They wasn't motivated to,
They bought it to protect their power lines and they're gonna hold it
yeah.
to protect their power lines.
I just really like
Yeah,
what that view is
Right.
up above, and you say it's not the same of what it's actually gonna be, but that looks very efficient to deal with a right-of-way issue and not have a bunch of weeds and, wasted ground that can't be used.
right.
So, it's my only thought, Chairman.
Any other questions from the commission? Is the applicant here tonight for this? Does the applicant like to come forward and anything you'd like to add?
Tim Alders, Handcrafted Homes, and Matt Robinson, Handcrafted Homes. I just want to address a couple things that you guys asked, just so we can point it out. On the lot, let me see. That lot right there, we did work it out with the engineer, so there is a 4,000 square foot building path. And with the road set off for the main road the lot isn't even where the road's going to extend, so and we will make sure the driveways are in the right spot. The Utah Power, when I first put this parcel under contract, I did try to utilize as much space. This neighbor didn't want to sell, told me he'd never sell. The other, Utah Power says they're holding on to it. So we had multiple renditions, I can't even number how many we went through, where we didn't have roads here. It was going to be more like a private little gated community. But the city wanted more roads just in case this ever became something else. So we've done it. This is the most practical and efficient design that we could come up utilizing what we had to work with. Right now, I know somebody's working on this right now, and we've worked with him where our road is. So we've utilized it to cut with other developers to keep the flow of the city going nice. Like I said, we're custom home builders. We think we're going to add a really nice product into your city, and we just wanted you to know that. But I think that answers the majority of the questions you had right there. So,
Thank you.
anything else for us then? If not, we'll sit down.
That's it, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions amongst the team for the preliminary plat and zone change for Bridle Creek? If there's not, I would entertain a motion one way or another.
We need to go to public hearing on it.
It's not a public hearing.
No, I thought it was.
No, it's just a preliminary plan.
Okay, thank you.
There was some recommendations from the staff, conditions there, 5 conditions. Does that need to be part of this, Dave, if we approve this?
Yeah, you'd probably want to approve it, including those conditions, I would think. Came from the city staff and then from DRC, I think, passed it through as well. So I would think that if we want to make a recommendation, the city council would want to include those.
You don't have to include them, though. You can exclude them if you want to.
It's our recommendation that you do, but it's entirely up to you.
Yeah.
That's been reviewed, probably suggested, because
Is number 3 still, that the applicant contact Rocky Mountain Power and provide a letter confirming lot 36, 37? What lots are those?
It's just, I believe,
It was addressing clearance requirements and how to make those
Do
lots.
they do that, or do you still need that letter?
It sounds like they worked with their engineers, but it
Still
hasn't
want
been
a letter?
submitted yet, so
Okay.
it sounds like there's a solution, you just haven't seen it.
it's certainly in their best interest to take care of that. And the other reason we bring it up is we don't want them to, essentially design a lot that you can't build on.
We don't want to.
Right. Highly motivated to not do that.
You're fine.
I'm just wondering, the developer, you're familiar with the conditions that they asked you to comply with? Were you comfortable with all of those, or did you?
Oh, yeah, we try to work with cities where we go. We're, like I said, a customer. We're trying to work hand in hand with you guys to bring a nice product with Spanish for it, so we're fine.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Bridle Creek preliminary plat, including the 5 conditions that are listed. Do I need to name all 5 of them?
No, you can just say included in the
Staff report.
notes.
In the second.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, excuse me, Amy, we have a motion by Commissioner Tagg, and we have a second by Commissioner Fallon. And let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Tanner.
Aye.
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 We'll go ahead and move to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is the River Point preliminary plat approval. If we can go ahead and hear from Mr. Anderson again.
Thank you. The real short description here is that this project was originally approved back in 2014. And because some time has lapsed since that approval, without the applicant moving forward to develop the property, that approval has expired and they've applied simply to have that reapproved. As we as staff reviewed the project again, we actually, I think, have modified some of the original conditions that we associated with the approval. The applicant has done some things that we wanted to see happen back in 2014. I think are a little bit easier for a couple of reasons now for the applicant to do. For example, on the version of the plat that I hope you have with your reports tonight, this connection to the trail has been relocated to here to follow an existing easement that we have along the eastern boundary line of the property. These lots have been reconfigured a little bit. It helps ease a concern that we have with the floodplain here somewhat. But that being the case, the Development Review Committee has recommended that the project be reapproved, which would lead to them being able to proceed with the development, subject to those conditions that we noted in the staff report.
We had some discussion on this. I'm trying to rack my brain around. We had quite the heated discussion. I don't say kind of heated, but we had a lot of public input because
I think it had to do
it was
with
one of those ones where they said, well, if you're going to do it for them, then you need to do it for us, because I think one was R12 and one was 15 or vice versa, or I can't remember. Do you remember that discussion at all? I'm trying to rack my...
I don't remember the zoning being a question.
I thought it was that access point.
The question
We
over
did talk
who
about that
owns.
quite a bit, that's right.
Was it?
In terms of who owned what property and.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Mr.
yes.
Career
Yeah.
voiced some concern
Yeah.
about.
The gentleman came in because they're saying that the property line, the entrance was going over his property.
Right.
So that, thank you. Now, I knew there was an issue and I couldn't remember what it was. So does the current plan resolve that conflict and making sure that the borders are resolved?
I haven't spoken with Mr. Career directly, but I understand it does.
Okay.
That's why it's aligned the way that it is so that it would provide access to both Mr. Career's property and the Barney property to the east.
And then, there was a lot of discussion about, lack of better words, I don't know, stuff that was dumped there, junk, trash. I don't think it was trash, probably the wrong term, but there was stuff that was dumped there.
Construction debris is what
Thank you,
it is.
construction debris. So has that issue been resolved, and does the city have any concern about the settlement there? I just don't want to have any more concerns about what we had like behind Kmart 20 years ago, so.
The short answer is we're okay. There's a lot of work to be done to get there. They worked with some geotechnical engineers to come into the site, remove all the debris, sort out stuff that has to be hauled off versus concrete. They're proposing to bring in a crusher to crush that concrete to an engineered fill level. That would be under the entire right-of-way for all the roads, as well as the entire building footprint, which really is about the whole property. So that work has not been done, and there's a long road to do it with the plans in place.
And I ask these questions not to question the staff, because we have a lot of professionals that work on our staff and that, and I don't do that. I just want to make sure that we're asking questions so that somebody doesn't automatically go, oh, I forgot to discuss
Yeah,
that, so.
Right, that's a big deal. For this
Floodplain was another thing that came up. Does the current plan resolve the concerns we had with the floodplain? Because I know there was a 10 and a 20 and a 30-year flood discussion.
So the 100-year floodplain, so the floodway is where the river actually runs, that you cannot disturb, you can't build in, fill in, those sorts of things. Well, it happens that the floodway, this dashed line across the back here, is the same line as the floodplain. Until you get to this point right here, the floodway continues on, while the floodplain in these low-lying areas wraps out, and that's a 100-year floodplain. DRC is recommending that the applicant work with the Army Corps to get a little more specific in those areas and have those lots be removed from the floodplain. They feel like this study could be fine-tuned to do that. If that's not possible, you can build in the floodplain. It's just flood insurance and some elevation requirements that I don't think anyone who lives there wants to pay the flood insurance, and we certainly don't want to see them. So I think all efforts are going to be made to amend the map to show that whether that is really in there or not on a
I'm not
more
seeing
detailed level.
comment about the Army Corps of Engineers in the notes or from the DRC. Should it be?
I think one of the motions was that the applicant work to get those lots.
It refers to FEMA, but to me they're not the same, are they?
FEMA is who they should work with.
Yeah.
I probably misspoke.
Okay, because
Army Corps is wetlands.
Army Corps is not
FEMA is-
FEMA,
Yeah,
so.
that's right.
Okay,
Thanks, I misspoke there. So.
all right, I'll make sure I'm clarifying.
I think the key there really is condition number 5 too, to make sure that we're getting the 40-foot access corridor that we want along the river, in exchange for some land that the city owns that would be on the other side of that.
And then the exit access we have over here, now this is not currently developed, so is this, I don't believe it is.
Yeah, these are actual homes here that you
These are?
see. Yep.
Okay, so is this developer, is this access here, I mean, is that a developer decision or a city decision?
Well, this road right now stops right there.
Correct, but to join them, is that a,
It's
is that,
a city decision because it'll
It
become
is.
right away for the city.
Yeah, the city wants it there, but of course the developer does as well, because that's how they're getting to the neighborhood.
correct?
As you can see, this is an update, so this is the latest iteration of the plan that we've seen. This is where that connection to the trail would be. You can see how this lot is configured a little bit differently than what we looked at a minute ago.
Wasn't there originally an access point right here somewhere? Because I remember we discussing this big barn or shed that was built here, garage, and there, with the road going through, somewhere in here, there was an access point.
Boy, we did talk about that a long, long time ago.
Mhm.
That wasn't part of the original approval, however, but I think that might have been one of the concept plans that the applicant put together way back when they first approached the city about doing the project. Incidentally, this property here is part of the development, so this much of 9th South would be improved with the project. But otherwise, we wouldn't see any other improvements on 9th South.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission for staff? No?
So the conditions that are listed in the staff report, we're looking at the 7, not the 7 one, but the 5, list of 5.
Listed there, David, but
2 sets of conditions.
Yeah.
What was the question? I didn't hear that.
There's 2 different sets of recommended conditions. There are, on page 2, it lists 7 different conditions, but I think you mentioned that a couple of them have already been taken care of, and maybe that's just a review of what was originally approved. But then on page 3, it lists the 5, there's only 5 conditions, so I just want to make sure we're incorporating the correct ones.
Yeah.
It was you mentioning number 5 on the 40-foot one, and I'm like, that number 5 is not 40 feet.
Exactly.
So,
The 7 are the ones that the Development Review Committee made here just a couple of weeks ago. And I know that condition number 2 there's been satisfied.
And it
But
But
eliminates
then
the,
again, number 5, the 40-foot access is not listed as one of the 7.
It's not, but it is on the plat, so I think we're covered there the way that we want to be.
But
So,
how would we word a motion then to cover this?
I think just by taking action on this layout here, that's in effect what you're doing. So,
it doesn't list the FEMA.
Actually, they're two different sets
Conversation.
of conditions.
They're very
If you read
different.
them, they're not
Yeah.
the same.
so what we have, the last ones are simply the conditions that came with the original approval versus the ones that the DRC made here again just a couple
Okay,
of weeks
so-
ago.
So we need to be looking at the 7,
I think that's probably best. And again, one of those has already been satisfied, but that's.
right? And number 2 has been satisfied.
And from a motion standpoint, we don't really care that it's been satisfied. I mean, we just say that
Exactly.
all of them,
Right.
all of them are,
Yeah.
and whether,
Right.
yeah, so. What has currently and does
Yeah, I
not really
appreciate that.
affect it from us.
Good catch.
Thank you.
Well, were the 5 conditions the staff and the 7 were DRC?
The 5 were the original conditions that the city council imposed back in 2014. And then the 7 are, I guess you could say, updated conditions.
And this is, again, we're recommending approval to the city council on this, or is it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here? No, the applicant is not here, so if you have any questions for the applicant? Huh?
He's watching.
Aye. All right, so, any questions from the commission? Anybody willing to make a motion, one way or another? I don't know how many people were on the committee last time, but, I mean, I think we beat this
I
up
think we
about
vetted it
on
pretty
four
well.
different sessions, and I think it's been pretty looked at in a variety of different angles, and it's good.
I'll make a motion, Chairman.
Okay.
That we move to recommend the reapproval of the River Point preliminary plat with the updated conditions to be included.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Tanner. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Wilkinson. We'll do a roll call vote starting with Commissioner Tanner.
Aye.
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 We will move to the next item on our agenda for the night, which is the reapproval of the Skyline Business Park.
Once again, thank you. This plat is unlike just about any that I've ever seen that we've talked about. This was developed in an effort to get a group of property owners to help make a subdivision that happened illegally more legal. It won't entirely be legal until really each of the different properties that was involved develops, but in essence what happened back in the early 2000s, 10 or 15 years ago, the different parcels that you see here in this area were conveyed to different property owners. They were sold without having gone through any subdivision review or approval process. So what that then did is it created parcels like this one and this one and this one and this one and this one here that don't have access to any public streets. They don't have access to any utilities. They're essentially landlocked and undevelopable. So the gentleman that operates Smash Athletics right here came to us back in 2012 and wanted to develop on one of those parcels that existed then. And we don't have a mechanism, frankly, to very well compel all of those different property owners to come to the city to participate in a subdivision to kind of rectify the illegal subdivision that occurred. So we created something of a plan B.
Can you kind of expand a little bit when you say illegal subdivision? Is this over the course of years they were added on without proper approval?
They were subdivided without.
Somebody simply had a deed prepared that they took to Utah County and had filed that created this as a new parcel.
Subdivided it.
And in effect, I mean, the state law reads that anytime you create one or more parcels, it's a subdivision. And that's really what happened here. They created 6 or 7 new parcels without going through any approval process. Which we're not nearly as hung up on that notion and that happening as we are just trying to look out into the future to make sure that there's a way for all of the land in that area to be usable. And again, the developer of Smash Athletics here, frankly, he was pretty good to work with. He had a plat prepared, kind of on behalf of all of the property owners that were impacted. And we talked about, you know, how to have a road designed, actually be roads designed there to get access to all of the different properties involved, with the idea that as these different property owners approach the city, and we've had more than one of them now approach the city about potentially developing, we can show them what that plan is to get utilities and streets and everything else to them so that the properties can be made usable. And that's where we're at with this project. So we're really talking about a code enforcement kind of a thing here. We've had an applicant approach us about developing another part of the property here next to Main Street. And I think this is more than just a formality. I don't want to make it sound like that's all that it is. I think it's a very important step that we go through to now reapprove this preliminary plat. Again, it was originally approved back in 2012, so lost its approval in 2013. It's fairly simple, and reapproving it then would allow this applicant to move forward to develop this property and just keep it alive for the next thing to happen as other property owners decide they're ready to make use of their property.
What's this skinny lot right there?
That is simply a parcel.
So this is all one in here, and this is all one here? Or
Correct.
not?
Yeah.
It just seems weird if they're gonna, with a preliminary plat, they wouldn't divide that up a little bit more.
This simply matches the way those properties were created with the subdivisions that happened. To me, it seems fairly odd.
So if I remember right, this is the area that we were proposing a waste management a year ago or so.
I think
This area
that's
here.
exactly it, yeah. If I remember right.
And then if I remember during that discussion, we had public utilities that went all the way to about right here,
Down in the corner,
down in here.
just right about off the page is where they're stuck to today.
So, Dave, is this, I mean, the way it's drawn here, I'm just looking at the Utah County map online, and it doesn't show that long property on the Utah County map online.
Oh, really? That might have been combined then with, somebody might have.
Might be recent.
With one of the others.
Oh, really? Yeah, but yeah, Utah County's doesn't.
Is it combined with this one or that one? Just out of curiosity.
It
Looks like it's the bottom one,
Really?
yeah. And it looks like these 4 are all owned by Utah County.
I know they talked about purchasing.
They just, yeah,
Some of
it's
those.
listed 2016, so it's recent, we can purchase some.
Even in the recent time we've reviewed the initial of this property owners, first time we looked at it in DRC, it showed the county owning more and up into here, and now the county just owns these bottom pieces.
Right.
So they've, unless that's changed too. but
Yeah.
And really, our
we
biggest,
noticed a lot.
sorry, our biggest concern with the plat is this right here, just that street. And you may see from some of the notes in the staff report that we anticipate that there likely would be a need for a street along the western boundary of the property as well, so.
If we anticipate a need there now, would it be easier to address it now during the preliminary plat stage versus later when we have to do easements and all that other stuff?
Boy, typically, yes, this situation's certainly not typical, so I don't know. Typically, we would do that. We would expect to see that on the plat, and that'd be a condition of approval.
I'm just wondering, is it needed to be? I mean,
I think certainly as we get to the point where we're looking at these lots developing, that's when we probably zero in on that. And frankly, that's when we probably can compel somebody to deal with it a little bit more easily than we can with that.
I mean, obviously, I don't want to speak for Chris and his Public Works Department, but I know that there's a lot of interest in this area for expansion for public utilities, public works, public, you know, and you look at the areas of our city and where we could grow as far as public works, that's some ideal property there.
We're looking at several big projects out there.
We also have the mechanism with our master plans, our transportation master plans that show that corridor up through that area as well as the other utilities, so as development comes in, that's something.
And that's exactly what I'm reading, is that that's a plan and the development's coming in, so we need to have this development match our plan.
Sure. And I guess the challenge is these owners haven't represented anything. This is one owner trying to get this parcel buildable, and he has no interest as far as ownership in the rest, so he's trying to submit something to go through the process so that he can then develop this piece. So I guess my feeling is if we show it, these owners aren't even a party to that. You know.
Well, you're the road guy, so.
Well,
We do expect
and it
the
could
road.
be either way.
Right.
We do expect the road.
Yeah.
That'd be your fight down the road if you want it, yeah. All right, any other questions from the commission for staff? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here for the Skyline business? Yeah, or would the applicant choose to address us or approach? Okay, the applicant is not here. Okay, with the applicant not here, is there any members of the commission that have further questions, discussions, or I would entertain a motion?
I would move that we reapprove the Skyline Business Park preliminary plat.
I have a motion by Commissioner Wilkinson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Commissioner Tanner. We will do a roll call vote. Let's switch it up this time. We'll start with Commissioner Wilkinson.
Aye.
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 Okay. We will move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Newport Village zone change. It is a public hearing. We will hear from staff first and then open it up for public hearing. So, Mr. Anderson?
I think in most respects, the proposal is pretty straightforward. The applicants requested R19 zoning, which matches what we have right across the street, and other zoning in the area. The lot sizes proposed here are very comparable to what we have in the Spanish Fields development to the south. Ivory Homes is the applicant here. This is proposed as a master plan development, so even though the zoning would be R19, you'll see some of the lots are smaller than 9,000 square feet, but the overall density of the project is underneath what the R19 zone would allow for. There have been a few things that have been a little bit interesting to just listen to the discussions about on the project relative to sewer service and some different things like that. And those have all been worked through. So the Development Review Committee has recommended that the proposed zone change be approved and the zoning be R19 for this property, and that the proposed preliminary plat be approved. Commission brought up a great question relative to, you can kind of picture Volunteer Drive coming around, the traffic getting from that Volunteer Drive corridor over to, potentially an interchange over here someday. Would that big connection from First South to Center Street be here, or is it
So,
on the road to the east?
so Volunteer Drive comes up and up 630 west right here. That's planned as a major collector, a larger facility. So it would come up there by SFCN and just east of the Justice Center. However, the master plan does show as well this, I think it's 920 west, as a more major road. Originally, the master plan showed that wider major collector But we got a little more fine-tuned with the traffic engineers, and they updated the model looking at that area, and felt that while it is a collector class, it's not that major collector, so it's more of a minor collector, which would then funnel a lot of this Spanish Fields area up through, and the master plan shows that at some point we may need a signal there, so I guess it's a kind
So
of
just to,
yes.
so just to confirm, the 5-year plan from UDOT, I thought I saw a plan that came right here and then down First South, but you're saying it's gonna go more down Center Street and then turn over more in this area?
Well, our master plan and based on studies, and I've seen both layouts, but our master plan, what we're planning on would be an interchange at Center Street. We would come off and connect into Center. Someday as the traffic needs are there, I would expect a signal at 630 West, which then as you go south turns into Volunteer Road. But we also have a need for a little higher traffic than a local road can handle. Kind of for this traffic down in Spanish Fields, that doesn't make sense to have them traverse east to go west, so
But in summary, you don't find that this development will interfere with your plan?
no.
Or UDOT's plan, more importantly, probably, right, for the interchange, that's.
Yeah, what we've done here, maybe, we've looked at the width we have on our master transportation plan and matched the alignment of Center Street. So it's hard to see, but the right of way would be dedicated down to the back of these lots. However, as you build an interchange, you'll want to intersect that at a 90 degree. And while we don't know the exact alignment, we know somewhere between the end of the road today and I-15 that's got to curve north and intersect. So I think we've protected ourselves for right of way on the south. That road will kind of pull to the north, and it will be elevated, so you have some grades to work out.
Has this been discussed with our UDOT partners at all? I just don't wanna put these houses, you know, you got a brand new family that comes in and purchases this, and all of a sudden, 5-10 years down the road, they come in and says, well, we need a bigger easement here, and causes heartache.
The study that was done for the interchange some time ago, UDOT was certainly involved in. Their involvement at this point is they're reviewing, 100 South is a UDOT road as well. So they do have a copy of the plans, and they're looking at an access permit to access 100 South. They haven't voiced concern that I'm aware of as far as anything on the north, but I can't say I've discussed specifically those issues with them.
UDOT put considerable effort back, I'm gonna say 2011, maybe 2012, into a study to identify a preferred alignment for that interchange. And that's what we're working off of still, is what they gave us then. It's not completely inconceivable that their plans might change in the future, but that's certainly the best document or planning effort that we have to go off of as we make decisions about surrounding land uses. That plan is something we took into consideration when we reviewed plans for the church here. We wanted to make sure that that wasn't, you know, going to deal with the exact same issue as what you're talking about. And we felt pretty comfortable that, again, based on what UDOT, in fact, UTA was very involved in that study as well, what their engineers put together, all of that construction activity will occur north of Center Street, so these properties should not be impacted.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? No? Okay. If there's no other questions for staff, I will entertain a motion to open the Newport Village zone change for a public hearing.
So moved.
We will at this time open our public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the commission? If you could come and state your name and your concerns.
My name is Randy Chipman, and I apologize if I sound like I'm in a hurry. I got a hard 7 o'clock deadline, so I'm going to say a couple things and then I got to split. But I live literally across the street from 100 South from Newport Village, proposed plat on Spanish Fields Drive. I actually don't have any problem with the proposed development. I think it'd be great. My main concern though is the traffic, and with the church going in, that's a single adult stake center. It is going to be a ton of traffic down Center Street to that stake center for a lot of different things. It is a massive church if you haven't seen it yet. So I guess my request is, if this is approved, to make 920 between 100 and Center, yes, a significant developed with a sidewalk, because a lot of people in my neighborhood in the Spanish Fields will walk to church up there. There's a lot of traffic between that south of 100 South to Center and to that church, and over to Center to get up to Main. So I guess my request would be to make sure that that 920, right now it's just a really rural road. There's nothing, curb and gutter on either side. I would hope that both sides can be developed so that a significant amount of traffic is encouraged to kind of get off of Center, or get off 100 and go up through Center. Thank you.
Typically, just so you know, the curb and gutter is
Yeah.
the developer, where this is not
Right.
developed. It'll be hard for us to push
Right,
that, but
yeah,
its comments are duly
I
noted.
guess just to plan on it and make it, you know, big enough for more than just a 2-lane road going
Yeah.
over. I don't know what it would be now, but
The master plan will be a 3-lane cross section, so it'll have a center lane. Today, with just widening the half, it would still remain as a 2-lane. So there would be curb gutter sidewalk here, as well as a trail coming along the north side. And then the church is building a trail around the perimeter of theirs
it connects into the other end.
that'll connect. We just have one last vacant, whether it's Nebo School District or this other parcel,
Yeah.
that we'll be working on getting a trail through to tie into the trail system in your subdivision. So
Excellent.
we're hoping that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Any other members of our audience that would like to address the commission? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing then.
I make a motion to close the public hearing. Oh,
I'm the applicant, do you want to speak after?
I'll get to you in a minute. Thank you. So at this time, we're going to close the public hearing. Is there any questions from the commission for the staff, or are you ready to
I do.
address the
Dave,
applicant?
so the general plan designation for this shows it as mixed use. And as I read through the general plan, I don't know that this fits what mixed use is outlined in the general plan. It talks about a transit-oriented development around this intersection, and it talks about, you know, the little chart we have in here for mixed use says urban village, residential office, and commercial 1. That's none of those. So can you address that? I mean, again, it goes back to some of the conversations we've had. Is there a reason we have a general plan if we're just gonna depart from it? So that's my question.
Yeah, I'll start with the transit-oriented development. Can you turn the general plan on? This area out here, because, again, with the study that UTA and UDOT did, UTA doesn't anticipate having a commuter rail stop that we know will be on the west side of I-15. So we would anticipate that any development that's gonna either be supported by that stop or that will support that stop will happen over there on the west side of I-15. So definitely there we would expect there to be an opportunity to do some of the things that are noted in that mixed use designation in the general plan. You know, for example, like with this property here, and maybe that's not the best example. I think we probably expect to see churches in a lot of different designations. You know, maybe it's this over here, these properties where, you know, frankly, I don't know that our crystal ball is so clear as to be able to predict what the best land use is going to be eventually. I view the mixed use designation as an area that gives us an opportunity to look at development proposals on a case-by-case basis and just see if they do or don't make sense.
And I think we need to look at our general plan in terms of what recommended zoning for that mixed-use designation then.
And, you know, we've talked about.
I know we
that.
have ad nauseam, I know.
Started.
I didn't want to bring up that four-letter word, mixed use, so.
Right, but,
Can I bring up something? Because I was thinking about the same thing. Because I had thought that we had talked about the areas that are going to develop with access to I-15 as being mixed use or possible retail or commercial or business opportunities. This is taking out a whole chunk of that opportunity and making it residential. And so, and I was just surprised that the Development Review Committee didn't even mention mixed use or the potential for that to be anything else except for housing.
Especially right off of a proposed interstate where potential, you know, fuel stations, Maverick station.
that certainly is another perspective,
Maverick's
certainly.
coming up
I
all-
mean, usually right off of interstates, we reserve those for
I mean, we talked about 2700 North,
retail opportunities.
you
I'll
know,
put it
is
that
it
way.
much different than Center Street here? That's, I guess, what I'm kind of
Yeah, I
wondering.
think those are great questions to ask.
I mean, it just, you think, you get off the freeway, you have your city center and your other areas. I mean, it's, this whole community, to me, this whole community in this town, if they want fuel, they've gotta go south or they gotta go north. And if I'm a person saying, I need to get fuel before I get on the freeway, might be an ideal place. I'm not necessarily putting a prop there for a fuel station, I'm just saying that instead of residential, that might be set aside for retail, commercial opportunity.
I think with what you're saying, you're taking a longer view than we did, just relative to the viability of that property and development potential. So not that I really want to be the spokesperson for the whole development review committee, but from my perspective, the idea that that property would develop in a manner that's consistent with what's right next door, fairly consistent at least with what we have over here to the north and the east, very consistent to the south, pretty good neighbor for a church, different things like that. We looked at it just, I think, as a matter of, is it compatible with
Yeah.
those uses?
It
Now,
fits in with what you already have.
yeah, I think what you're saying though, I mean, there's certainly value in that longer view perspective. I think one of the challenges probably that we have is that UDOT has not made any clear plans for when they might build that interchange. And that's not to say that still it's not appropriate for us as the city to look down the road
Well,
and use
we
the
are
word
planners.
preserve.
We are planners.
And I think that's certainly appropriate.
I'm not a developer, so I don't understand all the economic decisions that are made. Is there any motivation for a developer to, do something similar to even what was on, not similar, I don't want North Townhomes right there, but the mixed use idea where a good portion of that is zoned to the R19, but the part lining up to Center Street, be office buildings or little shop, I don't know, something more commercial or retail, and is there motivation to do that or not?
Yeah, I'd let the applicant speak to that.
Okay.
I think that's a very fair question.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
I think you brought up a good point, Bruce, by identifying that. You look at Center Street from Main Street down to I-15, you've got a lot of mixed use there already. And to give that up for residential could be something we regret down the road. With the police station there, you got SFCN, you got senior citizens, that whole Main Street to I-15 could be very much a mixed use with retail and opportunities.
Professional office buildings.
And I-
you got a
Next,
good point,
like,
maybe by splitting that, making half residential and the other half have that opportunity.
Which is fine.
Might be good planning on our part.
Now, I'm hearing something a little bit different than maybe mixed use, along with mixed use. And I don't know if this would be helpful or not, but we might want to zoom out a little bit. If you're thinking that this is an opportunity with this property to see maybe some type of professional office development happen, or some type of retail development happen. And I think one thing that is certainly worth considering is changing the zoning to maybe something like commercial office or commercial too. Something that clearly puts those rules in place.
Or even
Versus-
subdividing it where you have both. You put up the plat again, I mean, do we just go ahead and allow, so it's backed up to residential, but maybe if the developer wanted to, but maybe we could preserve.
I thought that's what mixed use was.
So within the same plat, you could have commercial and residential.
You certainly could. Yeah, and I think practically to make that happen, you're probably talking about half of the block. So you'd have about 200 feet of depth for whatever this use would be, and then the remainder. And again, mixed use. In fact, let's just pan a little bit to the east. You can see along that corridor. So again, this is kind of more how we looked at it, just relative to the properties that are designated mixed use to the east. Obviously we have a mixture of uses in that area. Professional office with medical clinics, obviously this building, public facilities, kind of a thing. In fact, a couple of them. But we also have quite a few single-family detached homes on lots that are comparably sized to what the applicant's looking at doing here. So I'm kind of struggling. I'm not sure that I know exactly what the best answer is. I do know that there's a landowner in this case that's highly motivated to sell this property to a developer. So whether you guys hear that or the city council does, that is something that will be discussed. And those are just some of the forces that you deal with when applications like this come about.
Let's hear from the applicant, and then we can come back to the staff. Is that okay with you guys?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, then. Okay. So,
I'm sorry, I know you closed to the public, we are the landowners, and since that's been discussed, can I address something?
let me hear from the applicant first, and then we'll come back to you in a minute. Okay? So this is the time I'd like to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Brian Prince with Ivory Development, 978 East Wood Oak Lane, Salt Lake. I appreciate the guidance and input that Dave and his team have given us throughout this process. There were a handful of questions. I'll jump to the topic at hand right now as far as the proposed land use. When we initially started looking at this property, we noticed the general plan designation and looked at an alternative that would be allowed in the mixed use of a higher density residential use. That was not officially frowned upon, but was from the staff, it was recommended that we look at a more traditional single family use, and that's where we ended up with the R19 that is very consistent and complements the adjacent neighborhoods. So that's where we ended up. I mean, we'd be happy to take into account or go back and look at a use that would fall within that mixed use designation, but it would be an attached housing townhome product. The challenge, like Dave said, is as far as the timing and uncertainty of when UDOT will take action. We took that into account as far as the design and adjust the boundary significantly to take into account the proposed right-of-way, Center Street connecting possibly to I-15, and lost some square footage there. But again, we think this proposal is consistent and complements the neighborhood and the chapel next door. There was a question about the UDOT application for 100 South. We have submitted plans to UDOT. They've approved the plans and they have our application and they have signed off on the plans. I think that's everything else has been addressed by Dave. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
have a question.
Yeah.
So just in regards to the concept that you looked at it first as mixed use, and then, kind of steered away from that for whatever reasons, when you considered it mixed use, what went through your mind as far as what would be a mixed use thing that a developer would consider putting right there?
Well, for now, and nobody has a crystal ball to know when UDOT's gonna take action. It could be 20 years. So, for the foreseeable future, there's not a real market. It's not viable to propose a gas station, to propose office, or anything like that.
It is for us.
That's great.
We're planners, we're looking 10, 15 years
No, I
down
understand
the
that,
road.
but from my perspective, as
Well, I
far
don't
as.
understand what you mean by it's not a viable option. That's my job, is to look at those options.
Well, I understand. I'm just saying from when we start looking at the plan, saying, do we try to carve off a piece and make it work? The land sellers, the property owners would like to sell the whole thing. They sold the western parcel to the LDS Church. They said, if it's for sale, you buy the whole thing. We're not going to preserve some other little strip along Center Street. And so the product that we looked at that would fall within that mixed use is a townhome product. A higher density multifamily product would not work. Would be so. That's the one thing we considered. We've come back to the table. This is last fall and proposed this lower density single family design, and we think that it is the best land use for sure.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So I'll go ahead and permit the landowner. He's wanting to speak. If you'd like to come up, sir.
I appreciate it. I know you're close to your other.
It's okay.
But basically, my name is Jay Thomas. This is my wife Charlotte, and so we're the landowners of where the church bought, and also the remaining property that we're interested in selling to Ivory Homes. And basically, for us to be able to carve off a section of that and leave for 20, 25 years from now, makes no sense to us. I mean, unless someone's willing to come in and buy that, to restrict us to be able to say we have to hold so much of that property to be able to put a gas station or whatever. That's totally infeasible for us to be able to do that, where we've got something on the table where we've looked at, and again, the church, we didn't really want to sell any of our property. We were hounded by the church for over 2 years to be able to sell that. And they would keep going back up the road, down the road, across the street, and so we had
They
no
finally
intentions
got
of- No, we did not want to sell this by any means, and after going what we've gone through, we just assume take the whole thing back anyway. But basically, and I really appreciate it. We kind of do the same thing. We lived during the construction of everything across the street from us. We lived everything from the construction. So, that's how we kind of see is, the property to be able to go into all homes makes more use to us to sell it in one piece than it is to try and carve something off.
Right.
And it's just kind of we'd like to be able to sell in one piece, and like I say, I know that Ivory Homes has really looked at putting that road against to the east, and I don't blame the one landowner who stood up and talked. We sit here and watch all those people that go up that road to go to church, and it's horrible. That's not even a 2-lane street. It's barely a 1.5.
We have a lot of issues like that around where,
Exactly, I understand.
you almost have to wait for development to come in to improve the roads,
Exactly.
right? So.
And I realize that's what they're offering too, and to see that, we feel so bad for those little kids going up and down the road. In fact, since we've taken our fence down, some of those have been going on to our piece just to be able to get off the road. And so it just seems, to us, to leave that as some type of mixed use, if someone's willing to buy that, to hold on to that for that, that would be one thing. We own street property actually on the other side as well. And all that other side has, basically, it's, I can see that as probably potential. So you're not saying that there's no other mixed use if you take that piece off. There's still property still left there. And they have no intentions on selling or developing at this point. But like I say, UDOT, when we looked at UDOT, we had lots of developers that came in and, looked at it. And that's 20, 25 years down the road, as far as UDOT, if they do build there, because the talk's been off First South, talk's been off not even doing this one, doing the one off by the Ford dealership. So, that's talk that's sitting out there for, and I understand what you're saying.
And I agree with you. We just have to consider
understand, but
those, because
what we're
even though they
saying-
are 10 or 15 down the road,
Right.
the decisions we make now
Right,
can affect down road planning, right?
I understand.
So even though I understand that there's visions, we have to take them into consideration,
I
right?
do, and, yeah, and I'm saying, that's just what we're saying, is that if it's mixed use and someone wants to hold it and buy it for that, that's great, but there's no one that would want to buy that. You
No.
know, well, now or 20 years from now, but
If 5 years
if
from
we
now they
knew,
put an
well,
on-ramp
if we
there,
had
you'll
that
have people
great
pounding on your
we'd
door.
hold on to it, because then it's worth money, it sells by the square foot, not by the acre, you
That's
know.
my point.
I know, but like I say, I just wanted to voice that concern towards you, and I appreciate your time so much to let us talk.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we've heard from the applicant, staff. Do we need, anybody have discussion points, any clarifications?
Dumb question, does the railroad, does it end there? So it's abandoned, basically?
It's a railroad
It's still
spur
is
that is in service.
It is in service, okay.
I don't know how often, we could probably find out, but Wasatch Pallet brings in lumber and
Okay.
things like that. So the train will come in and then come down into the Wasatch Pallet.
So from where the train track is to the south, how much offset was needed to create the right of way needed for a future center store? I mean, because I assume from a road perspective, you're taking the same 10 to 15 year
Yes.
perspective that we're trying to as well, right?
Yeah, and there's I don't know the distance off the top of my head,
Okay.
that railroad spur is probably in the center of Center Street. So we didn't really base off of the railroad per se, we looked at the alignment of Center Street back here. And coincidentally, that last section gets actually slightly larger than Center Street as it sits today, so we have a fairly good buffer. But we're probably 50 feet off the railroad, if I was guessing,
50,
somewhere in
so-
that 50 foot.
Okay. I guess, so here's my thought process. When I look at, so that's, what I see is that's 600 and, sorry, I'm looking at my map here, 664 feet. Is that, am I reading that right?
I think so.
From there, and so you thought maybe 200 feet would be needed for if it was a retail or other mixed use type
Yeah.
thing? I'm not saying that that's what I want, but I'm just making sure I understand.
I think so. Our typical
Okay.
blocks are 400 feet. This is a little bit bigger because of how the road
Right,
swings to the south.
okay.
So yeah, typically 200 feet is kind of the minimum that you want for a non-residential property's depth.
Kind of goes with what we were, that overlay that we dealt with down here, right?
Yeah.
So that would leave you 400 feet, take 200 off.
Mhm.
So I just have a question on kind of more of a, I guess, personal side of things. If I was the homeowner who bought the property along Center Street there, and 15 years from now, major interchange is put in on my back steps, I wouldn't be really thrilled about that, personally. Does I-15, or does UDOT, or whoever's in charge of all that stuff, what do they do for the property owners in a situation like that? Are walls built, or is anything done to divide that off, or is that just life,
If
if you
the-
have a main
Yeah.
off
that's-
ramp in your backyard?
You know, I'm not sure that UDOT has a one-size-fits-all, but I think it's safe to say that if there's not a pretty direct adverse impact on a property or a neighborhood, they won't do anything. And I think this kind of a situation for all the properties that are maybe east of I-15 along that Center Street corridor, I wouldn't anticipate that UDOT would do anything if they constructed an interchange at I-15 and Center Street, right there. The best thing that we can do as a city is show things like that interchange in our transportation master plan, show Center Street as the arterial class road that it is, with the really huge right-of-way width that we already have, elsewhere along the corridor that we're planning to extend all the way to the interchange, so that should somebody really want to get informed about what the future might bring, they could before they bought, which of course that very rarely happens. So, you're right, when there is a game changer like, I mean, you've seen a lot less significant things than an interchange create quite a bit of public concern in the community. It'd be interesting when we get to that point in time, because I think also that interchange would be so needed by the community that on one hand, we as the municipality likely would be doing everything we could to promote its construction and development and that kind of a thing. And of course, not everybody's always happy with how those decisions
I think
play
we should
out.
look out for that homeowner today. That's all my concern.
Brad was the only one on the commission that was involved in the development of the general plan. Do you have any recollection of the discussions about that getting designated mixed use? Probably similar to what we're talking about is my assumption, but, and Dave,
But
you
I
were
mean,
around too, so.
Again, you could zoom out just like all the way along the corridor.
We went through and anticipated during that process of future road expansions, and for the sake of preserving some of those areas for commercial or retail environment, we changed a lot of those settings. So to give us the opportunity to have discussions like we're having now. If we had not changed that to mixed use, frankly, this applicant could turn in a proposal and build without even really having this discussion.
Well, it still has to get zone changed because it's rural residential
It's
right now, so,
Well, not what it was before though. Well, yeah, residential.
yeah, zoning, rural
Yeah.
residential, right.
But we did that as a way of allowing us to have this discussion like we're having now.
I think that's a great way to state it, so that, again, this is hard for me because I feel like I'm maybe sending mixed signals. There's nothing that somebody in my position is going to appreciate more than working with a planning commission that's concerned about following the general plan, right? I mean, that is great, and I
But
really
those are our marching
appreciate
orders, aren't they?
that perspective and motivation, right? That's what we're taught, and that's what we try to do. I do regret that the mixed-use designation over the years has led to as many differing perspectives as it has. So all I will do is just try to, again, succinctly restate my perspective, which is that, there were certain parts of the community where we thought potentially different land uses could make sense, and we didn't know necessarily what that composition and recipe would look like over time. So with the mixed use, we try to do, I think, what Commissioner Gonzalez just stated very well, which is to create that opportunity to have the kind of discussion that you're having tonight relative to, what maybe does or doesn't make sense and why, and what the future might bring. That was really the spirit that we were coming with, so.
I mean, I guess I look at, the discussions we've had early on about higher density housing, and again, I'm not saying that higher density is the right answer here either. But if you look at the criteria that that we may consider for locations in the city for that, the fact that there's two fairly good, street systems with Center Street and First South that bound this, and then the future potential for the intersection, to me, this is a prime location for the potential.
It's gonna be a collector road, it's
yeah.
gonna be an off-ramp, it's gonna be a major transportation area between, as we look at diverting some of the traffic from Spanish Fork Main Street, being so busy right now, I think that there's some huge retail opportunities there.
What my opinion is that mixed use purpose was, based on all of our discussions, to me, it was a buffer between major congestion and transportation and people in our residential areas. And that's what, I don't know, I just feel strongly if there's going to be an off-ramp right there at some point in time, there has to be some buffer between the residential and that major transportation system. That's just concerning to me. And I thought that's what mixed use was helpful with. I don't know if that's correct.
I know it's not what the landowner desires, I know it's not what the developer desires, but I could tell you that if that block was split in half, I would have no concerns. Where the residential goes all the way to Center Street, I don't know that it's a decision that meets our long-term plan, or our long-term vision. And I think that I take a lot of pride as being a planner. I think if we're just sitting up here making decisions and not planning for the future, then I think that we're not relevant and might as well go straight to the city council. The
So,
city council you know, they're making the final decision, and I think that's why we're sitting here is looking at what is our vision, what is our plan down the road.
So what are our options, Mr. Anderson, tonight in terms of moving forward?
Approve or deny or table it.
I figured that's the case, but I just want to make
I
sure.
think there's a fourth as well. You could recommend approval or denial of the proposal as it currently sits. You could continue it, and you could recommend some alternate proposed zone change, if that's something that you would consider.
So based on what we've talked about, what would your recommendations be for an alternate zone change?
You know, I guess the thing that I'm trying to grapple with a couple of different things here, and you know, maybe some of this I should care and worry less about, but maybe to start with this one. So again, like I've said, I don't think, practically speaking, that preserving any land for non-residential uses unless you have about 200 feet of depth is the best thing to do. I mean, certainly there are examples in town where we have commercial properties that are shallower than that, but I don't think you want to at least start with anything less than 200 feet. So I'd probably consider that. And then on the remaining part of the property, if you wanted to go a different direction, on any part of it still, R19 zoning, that's something that, again, we as staff felt would allow development that's compatible with what we have in the existing area. And this is where I'm afraid that I might be worrying a little bit more about just some of our recent history than I need to, but last time we talked about any higher density than that in this part of the community, it frankly led to a lot of hard feelings that still come up. These last few weeks, we've had some residents complain still pretty vocally about the last townhome project that we looked at, you know, on this side of the city. So I'm a little bit skittish to necessarily suggest that, but at the same time, if it's going to be zoned commercially there, it may make some sense to look at a little bit higher density next to the commercial use. So I think we probably could chew on a number of different scenarios with the specific zoning.
But leaving it how it is allows us to do that, though.
Leaving the
Mixed use would allow us, because we just put that other facility out here on Volunteer Drive in a mixed use
yeah, I think
designation.
in my mind, that's the beauty of that designation, is that I think it does. It gives you a tremendous amount of latitude to consider a lot of different things. It might also be what kind of gets us hung on the other side, right? So much latitude that, you know, the direction ends up being confusing. But does that make sense? I mean, I think you could look at it several different ways.
I do like that it's homes and not townhomes. What's the zoning just to the east by the, like across the street from the den, I guess, across the street from the Canyon View Medical and that kind of stuff? What kind of,
To the north,
Mixed use.
to the east?
so
Government zoning or general plan?
What is the zone? Like,
This is
what are those
general
right there?
plan, I can,
yeah, let's go over.
I'm just wondering what the houses, the residential that are in that mixed use section right there.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Right
was
there.
wondering, yeah, what's that zone?
R1
8.
8, then we also have R1 6, R3 here. This is the senior kind of little project.
Because that's all the same
Right.
mixed use.
And
You
you
know
can
how we had
see-
talked about other type of senior housing areas, would that be considered a good area for that or not really?
Yeah, I think, just like here, I mean, very similar circumstance to what we looked at with this project.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think so.
I'm not making a motion, but I'll just make my feelings, so, because I don't know that it's time, I don't feel like everybody's on the same page to start doing a motion, but I have two things. Either, I like to just leave it how it is. I'm not a proponent of changing it mixed use, because I think it gives us some flexibility of what we want down the road. But I also don't always know maybe what the city's council would like, so I don't want to pass the buck, but I almost want to say, pass it with a challenge of them saying, we're okay with the proposal, but don't approve it if you visualize, but challenge them not to approve it if they see that as viable options for commercial use or retail use down the road. I'm actually okay with the plan as far as because it matches the surrounding area. But I guess I keep going back to that word preserve, is if we visualize down the road a better option, then I recommend that we don't. So that's how I
Well,
feel.
what happens if we continue? It doesn't just come back next planning
Gives
commission
you more-
meeting, it gives us time to go and do some homework and consider, okay,
Gives us time to
this
think
is the
about it.
best thing for this situation.
Exactly, yeah, and it's always helpful, I think, if you're contemplating continuing things, that you have some understanding as to what it is that you hope to accomplish over the course of the next month. But frankly, I think sometimes we do act on these proposals maybe a little bit more hastily than we really need to. And obviously applicants and property owners are always very highly motivated. We try to be very respectful of that. But yeah, if there are specific things, if there's anything that we as staff could help with over the course of the next month by way of looking at anything,
I have a
happy to
road-
do what we can.
I have a road question that might help solve the question. Right now, the current proposal doesn't have access right here. Even if we visualize something there, will UDOT allow on and off right there, that close to the interstate? So maybe we don't have a choice, because maybe UDOT won't even allow access to businesses. So if that road, let's say the off-ramp came off right here, they might not even allow that close to the off-ramp access.
I think you're thinking along the right lines. I mean, you picture Orem and recent change of events where they had access is very close to the interchange, and as that's widened and as traffic's got more, you see gas stations going out of business because now the access is around the block. And that's not bad necessarily, but looking at spacing, certainly if there's a signal here as we anticipate someday, access between that signal and I-15, maybe a right in, right out at most would be what I picture, if anything.
So that's the thing, is
But
we
do
could,
have a little beefier road along the east that,
we could be holding up a whole project for this whole block, when in reality, the only thing that's potential is that corner.
limited access at best is what I would picture, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's another way to look at it too.
Based on today.
They don't have any preliminary design at all for that intersection.
I think the study was done to look at spacing and where along I-15 do we
Right.
picture these. So
I think there's what I would call a preliminary conceptual layout of a facility there.
they've laid something out. When they get serious, it's an environmental study that is certainly millions of dollars that gets into the.
No, no.
No, there's, I think it's on their, what they would call their long range, 15 to 20, 10 to 20 year range that can be a moving target at that level.
I didn't anticipate this topic being so long. I thought it,
I think I might just chime in just a little bit, maybe another perspective here. I work with this planning commission, so I kind of know their personalities and where they're coming from a little bit, and understand they want to preserve and do what's best down the road for the city. I also know that if you wait until you think you have the best prospect, because you never are sure, then there would never be any development, because you always think, there might be something better. And the development actually drives a lot that goes on here in the city. And I hate to penalize homeowners and developers because we think that there might be a better prospect 20 years or 30 years down the road when they've got something viable on the table. That really, if I look at the project that they're proposing, would be an enhancement to what's already existing in that neighborhood. In other words, it would probably be the rose of what we see in that neighborhood, and maybe the standard would be set a little bit higher because of what Ivory Homes did. If I knew for sure exactly what UDOT was going to do and when they were going to do it, that would probably make me look at this a little differently, but I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard talk of interchanges for years and years and years, and chances are that's what is going to happen down the road. It may be years and years and years. And so I am torn a little bit because of the, you know, the want to preserve and create the best thing for the community down the road. And I can see, you know, well, if it was mixed use, why don't we use it for mixed use, and let's put some things along the freeway that the consumer, or like you've indicated, people who need, as they approach the freeway, some commodity or whatever, put it close. But there's also other areas around there on the other side of the freeway and whatnot that could be looked at for service stations and so forth. So I'm, you know, I'm probably more along the lines of look at the development and see how it's going to fit for the community right now, and see if that's going to be a good decision. And so that's kind of the direction I'm looking, actually. And we can always vote, and everybody can go a different direction, and the city council will make the decision anyway.
Hey Dave, I had a quick question for you. No, just going back to the fact that the Development Review Committee didn't mention anything about anything, I'm assuming that they are all on the ball and would have mentioned something had they felt that other things would have been viable. Are you on the same page as that? As what was just said, I guess.
Yeah, again, I think we took just simply the perspective of what's compatible with the surrounding area. You're really feeling like the mixed-use designation allowed for latitude to go a lot of different directions. So I just say that I think it was a difference of perspective maybe that we took from what we've kind of talked about a little bit here tonight. I really think it's that simple.
I don't know that they considered the commercial aspect of it.
And that's fair to say. We did not talk about this necessarily as having a viable commercial opportunity.
I would like, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion. If you guys, maybe if you agree or disagree, but I don't wanna make a decision either way. I would like to maybe do something that I haven't done in the 6 years I've been here, but is to make a motion to table it and ask that it go back to the DRC to review the commercial aspect of it. And if the DRC comes back with, they've reviewed it and they don't look at it as a viable option, then I'd like to see it come back to us. But I would like to table it and ask it go back to the review committee to look at the options for commercial use, and if that's in our plans from a city perspective.
I like that motion. Would you further clarify that by maybe some of our dialogue was salvaging maybe 200 feet from Center Street and possibly even let them do for the other 600 feet what they're proposing? Or are you saying the whole chunk of ground but the commercial?
Well, I don't know that the DRC will look at the general plan or that, because that's more in our lane per se.
Yeah.
But I do think that they can take that into consideration if they look at options that way.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I've heard everything you've said.
Okay.
And that's what we, you know, that's exactly what we do. Whether it's 1 acre on a corner or, you know, a 3 acre stretch along the northern part of the property or whatever, what's viable. And Commissioner Gonzalez, I think, touched on what probably for us will be very key, just access. What does that look like in the future?
That's what I wanted to add to your motion.
Dictate a lot.
I like that.
And we can talk more about this tonight relative to commercial potential in the future. We as a city, we're about to employ a resource we've never used before that could help shed some light on that pretty quickly as well. So
I'd like to
that's great.
formally make a motion then to table it, to go back to the DRC to review from a commercial aspect, access points, maybe a little bit more over the UDOT plan, and to see if, acknowledging that staff might not have looked at it from that perspective, ask it to go back to them and review it from a commercial aspect of it to see if they still have the same recommendation.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. Do a roll call vote with Commissioner Tanner.
Aye.
I
Aye.
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 So thanks for the input, landowners and applicants. I know it's probably not what you want, but we want to make sure we've done our homework, and this gives us the opportunity to go back and revisit a few things. The staff will review a few things that'll come back before us again in 30 days or next month. If it was, okay? Thank you. The next item on our agenda tonight is,
Do you a motion for the preliminary plat? Are you going to continue the preliminary plat till the zone change?
we will,
Do you want to have that motion be for preliminary plat and zone change, or just zone?
for both of them, because I don't want to review the preliminary plats until, thank you for the clarification. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Dave's Storage. It is a public hearing as well. We'll hear from staff and then we'll open up from public hearing. So if we can hear from the staff on Dave's Storage, please.
I guess I'll describe the proposal this way. First of all, staff's recommending that the proposed self-storage overlay be approved for this project so that the applicant could essentially finish the development of Dave's Storage, which right now consists of a number of different buildings on this property here. Should the self-storage overlay be approved at this point, the applicant would be eligible to receive building permits to construct these two structures here and move forward. Now, this is really the one and only image that we have to present relative to Dave's Storage. And one thing I just want to touch on, by way maybe of a little bit of precedent that might only have value for us as we work together, because this property is really hidden behind other developments, and like maybe I'll talk about here in a minute. At least we as staff don't necessarily see another better, more beneficial use of this property than what's proposed here, just finishing the storage unit complex with these next two buildings. And given the nature of the surrounding land uses, we don't feel like any of those would be adversely impacted with the storage unit buildings being built. We feel comfortable, again, recommending that the overlay be approved, just to allow the same type of development to occur as what's happened before with the other buildings that have been built in this storage unit project. And with that said, ultimately the city council, if they follow the ordinance properly, should make the 7 findings that are listed in the self-storage overlay. And I think in this case it's pretty easily to note that each of those 7 findings are met with the proposal, so I won't read through those one by one. But I will note that, for example, maybe it's number 7 that I'm really concerned about, with some other locations in the city where we've talked about storage units being built, and just suggest that maybe the next time we see a self-storage unit project proposed, it's going to be accompanied by some architectural renderings, materials boards, different things like that. For any locations maybe where, even though other development opportunities on those properties are limited, maybe it's the configuration of a property or access or something like that, but just their visibility would be such that we really do expect storage unit projects that are built in the city going forward to be state-of-the-art, to put it one way, really to be pretty high-end in terms of being built in a contemporary fashion that matches level of quality that we are accustomed to seeing with new projects that are built. So that all being said, we have no concerns recommending that the overlay be approved here on this project.
Thank you. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to open Dave's Storage for public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Public hearing now open. Is there anybody in the audience that'd like to approach the commission? Make the record note that there's nobody in the audience to approach the commission or speak to the commission, and I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Have a motion to close. Any questions from the commission for staff or any discussion? I personally feel it's the right thing to do. I think that it meets the current aesthetics that are there. Speaking on, kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Anderson said, that we do have a desire to look at some improvements, but where this is not infringement on people around other areas, it's kind of isolated and back behind where we already have existing. I think it's the right thing to do because it's an addition for what was a plan of years back that never happened. Zones changed, and now it's just merely an opportunity to continue what was not finished in years past. I see no effect on adjacent areas. I think we do look at that a lot when we're making these overlays, is how does it affect the surrounding areas? And in my opinion, it doesn't feel like it affects the surrounding areas. Does any other members of the commission have feelings about this one way or another?
I agree with you, Brad. I think that with the commercial zoning that's located, here and here, and the fact that it's screened from Main Street, I don't see any reason why not to do this.
And frankly, I think it's a better look than what we have currently have, so.
Do we need to, the 7 points there, is that something that we need to address in our motion, or is that something the city council has to address?
I think it's appropriate for you guys to at least note that you feel like those are all satisfied. We don't necessarily need to read them verbatim, but if there are any that you don't think are met, we should probably talk about them. At least that's the idea.
Okay.
That would kind of be the measuring stick for the overlay.
If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the, what is it called now? Well, it's a zone change, but it's an self-storage overlay. Thank you, that's what I want to make sure. For the Dave's Storage zoning map amendment approval request, having reviewed the 7 points of the overlay that's required, it appears that it meets that, so.
I have a motion by Commissioner Folland. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a second by Commissioner Tanner. We'll do a roll call vote with Commissioner Wilkerson.
Aye.
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 And we will move to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is the Quick Quack Car Wash zone change. So I'll let the staff address us on that.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don't say that 10 times. Quick Quack Car Wash.
I think it might be helpful here, actually, I had to go to the GIS and general plan, but subject property is located on the corner of 400 East and 10th North, the southwest corner there. And currently, at least this far east, the properties on this corridor over to 6th East on 10th North are all zoned residential. The general plan calls for these properties to be designates these properties mixed use, so we've talked about, there are a number of different zoning options that at least I think you can consider for properties with that designation, but I will say that I feel pretty strongly that properties that front 10th North, a roadway that the city's made a pretty substantial investment in, and that we have pretty high hopes for. I think we do anticipate that they all will develop with some type of a commercial use. So we as staff have looked at the proposal to change the zoning to C2. We think that's very consistent with the real vision that we've had for that part of the corridor. So in effect, I would guess that the zoning all along that corridor at some point in time will match what we have on the north side of 10th North. The trick over time will be, and I think this might relate again a little bit to the discussion we had earlier, what do you do as we get a little bit further to the south, as those non-residential uses start to get a little bit more commingled in more of the residential part of the community down here. But as far as the corridor along 10th North is concerned, speaking for myself and the Development Review Committee, I think it was very easy for us to look at that proposed zone change to C2 and say that it makes sense to us, by way of us eventually hoping that all of the properties along that corridor are zone C2. Now, there are a number of different uses that are permitted in the C2 zone. We know the applicants would like to build a car wash there. That is a permitted use, so that's something to consider as you contemplate the zone change. But like I've mentioned before, and like we talked a little bit about on the field trip earlier tonight, when we're talking about a zone change, I really think the most appropriate perspective to take it has to do with the whole range of uses that are allowed in that zone. Typically the zoning outlives any particular business or land use. So with the zone change, I think you're considering something bigger than just one particular tenant or operation. But again, the Development Review Committee has recommended that the change to C2 be approved.
Sorry for the silence. There's like 10 things that the city recommended. I'm reading through a few of them, so just to refresh my memory. Any questions for staff before we open it up for a public hearing? Actually, you know what? Before we do public hearing, I'd like to hear from the applicant first. That way the community can hear that first before they do that. You guys okay with that first? Okay, so I'd invite the applicant, if they're here, to address the commission.
I'm Dallas Hakes. We purchased this property a while back and with the intent to change it to commercial, the zoning to commercial. We've gone around and spoke with the adjoining properties. Mrs. Birch that lives here, she also owns this home here. She's actually lives here and is renting this home. She is anxious for the zone change because she wants to sell, but sell with commercial value, not residential. And it's the same with the other neighbors that we discussed with. So I think that most of the homeowners here, or at least the ones we spoke with, are expecting the zone change, or at some point the zone change to happen so that they can move on. The noise and traffic here is obviously a nuisance for anyone trying to live there, as you know, if you've ever been to lunch over here. We presented quite a bit of information already. I don't know if you have any questions about that or any specific questions about the site I can answer. I mean, I could go through the stuff that we presented that...
I'd like to ask a question, just one of them, which you said the applicant, there's a request on here to close at 9 p.m. I'd actually look at putting a request for that to be earlier, just because of the surrounding area. Would a request for 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. put a damper in the business?
Yeah, those are just summer hours, so all the businesses that are here on this side of the street are mostly restaurants and close at 9 p.m. as well.
I'm not as concerned about the ones over there, just out of due respect, but I'm more worried about the ones on the south side, just because they're backed up to residential, right?
So if this zone change happens across 10th North, like Mr. Anderson was talking about, more than likely it would be retail, some sort of retail or something would probably be open till 9 p.m. as well. If it's a concern, what would be the main concern? Is it
Noise, lights,
yeah, so we
vacuums, traffic, all of it.
so more than likely all the commercial that's going to be here would be something open till 9. I believe Costco closes at 8, but the fuels facility stays open till later than that. We've been over here and tested the noise all along this road here and some up here.
Can you expand on the word test? When you say you
by testing the decibels of the noise
from the traffic?
From the yeah, well, whatever noise there is, which supersedes any noise, is the traffic there. So you're upwards of 90 decibels anywhere along the street right here where these these condos or apartments are.
What time was that taken?
We did it at 8 o'clock, at 1 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock in the evening. So 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 6 p.m.
You didn't do one at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock?
You know, we didn't.
Dallas,
Yes.
the city ordinance for noise changes at 9 p.m. The ordinance that was adopted.
Ordinance number 02-12 that the city adopted back in 2012 has a chart that shows when the noise ordinance changes, and changes at 9 p.m. From 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. is considered day, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. is considered night.
Dallas, some of the
Yes.
residential that could very well stay residential depending on, you know, what they do. We're gonna have a blend here from when this eventually ends up commercial to possibly having residential right up against it. When you called me and asked me a few questions on my thoughts on it, you mentioned that there was a couple of these facilities in the country, at least one that actually had residential right up next to it. And it was maybe a permanent situation that it wasn't gonna go away.
That's right.
It was just, how's the success been with that? Has it been?
Actually, one of my partners is here that built that location and has operated for 10+ years, and if you want, I could let him speak to that. If you don't have any more questions about the site right now, he can answer that. Is that okay to have Jason?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the issue for us, and we have.
Go ahead and state your name, please.
Jason Johnson. We've built several of these in California, right next to residential property, and with similar, actually very similar noise ordinances is what you have. And what we've done is just mitigate so we get to the 65 decibels at the property line, which is actually quieter than what the street noise would be, even from 1000 north there at that property line. So they're going to hear the street noise from that residence just as well as they'll hear any activity up to 9 p.m. at the car wash. So we can mitigate all of the noise to get within the ordinance at the property line.
What kind of a barrier in that application is there? Is it a 6-foot wall, 8-foot wall?
We're not proposing a wall on the south side of the property right now, which is the area you're discussing. But all you do is you create a barrier around
right here.
That's correct. Just create a barrier around the actual vacuum producer. There's also a muffler on that producer, so it makes very little noise even if you're standing next to it. But you put a 6-foot wall around the producer, and that reduces the noise before you get to the property line.
See?
What about the relationship with the neighbors? Of course, you're going to say that how you want, obviously, but I'm just wondering, you know, how that's been, that relationship.
Yeah, it's a great question, and right, they're not here to represent themselves, but in our estimation, we've become very good neighbors. The noise hasn't been an issue, which is the main concern that they expressed before we go in. We had in Folsom, which is a very expensive area in the Sacramento region, we had a neighbor actually stand on the property, and we turned on a vacuum machine that we had on site before we built, and they wouldn't believe that it was on, so we actually had to call them my cell phone and listen to the machine so they understood it was actually running. And it kind of helped. They were there at the hearing for the city of Folsom when we built that car wash to describe, you know, the interaction that we had with them prior to building. But we haven't had any complaints at any of our facilities since we've opened for noise issues.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. I also want to say thank you, just very professional papers and presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
At this time, I'd entertain a motion to open up the Quick Crack Car Wash. I should have to slow down when I say that, huh? For a public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Hold on. Yeah, I'm just hoping I'll get you make a motion. At this time, the public hearing is now open for listen to the public, so I invite you up.
My name is Helen Evans.
Hello, Ellen.
I've been watching you guys point. I can't even see where my property is. I own the property right next to what he's talking about. So mine is actually the townhome. Yeah. So I have two that would be just right on the, well, all of them really, but two, their backyard would look under that. Well, I'm very familiar with car washes. I wash my car. I know what those vacuums sound like. And it's not the vacuums, it's the air dryers. I would no more live there than the man in the moon. And I have tenants. I have a tenant that's lived there since '09. I have a tenant that's lived there since 2010. And I'm a sole owner. And that's pretty much a lot of my income. And I can't have a huge turnover because I actually maintain them and the upkeep. I mow the lawns, I fertilize. And the people that live there, actually, I think I keep them because, and the road noise, even though Costco's right across the street, it's still pretty quiet in there. But I don't think it's gonna be quiet with a car wash beside it. I am worried about the lights. I'm worried about the traffic. I'm more worried about the noise than anything. Because no one's gonna wanna sit out in their nice fenced backyard and listen to a car wash. Go on and off the dryers. I'm sure you guys go to car washes. They make a lot of noise. And I don't think any of you would want to live with one in your backyard.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience?
Hello, my name is Stephen Hawkins. I live at 400 East, 900 North, right on the corner. It's on the west side, north corner. My concern is not about noise or lights. My concern is about traffic. Right now, the way they did that intersection right on that corner, people come down, they do U-turns in my driveway 30, 50 times a day. There's a lot of kids, people who walk to the Costco park, and I think car wash there will create more traffic and make it harder for people to actually go through the intersection, so they'll come down my road, and so it'll actually increase traffic and people doing U-turns in my driveway. That's my concern, is traffic coming up and down the road and doing U-turns in my driveway.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello?
You want me to introduce myself?
For the record, yes.
I'm Brent Whitnell. I'm with Dave. I absolutely agree that that should be changed to a C2, that zone. It fits everything. It fits the progress of Spanish Fork. We've worked really hard to get all that development going. However, as a citizen and going on that road 2 dozen times a week, I mean, I fear for my life every time I turn left into Macy's or when I turn left into Costco, unless you're at a stoplight. You know, I think that the traffic is going to be a huge conflict. To kind of reiterate what she said, it's not the vacuums that cause the noise. He's absolutely right. There's mufflers, you can hardly tell they're on. But when you've got, the industry standard is that you have one 10 to 15 horsepower motor for every foot your tunnel is. So if you have an 80-foot tunnel, you should have 80 horsepower of blowers to dry that vehicle. So that's 8-10 horsepower motors if there's an 80-foot tunnel that are constantly coming on and off right there in the backyard, in the back of somebody's residential, as well as off to the side. My biggest issue that I have with this is, and everyone here, most everyone on the commission knows who I am. Most people watching know who I am. I am the co-founder and co-owner of Wiggy Wash. And I'm not up here because it's a potential competitor that is applying for this zone change. I thrive on capitalism. I love competition and think it's great for every industry because it will make everybody push and progress and try to deliver a better product to the consumer. So I'm absolutely for competition. But I also have a lot of knowledge in this industry and know how this industry works. I know what we, you know, anybody, I know I can speak for Brad and I can speak for Brad, you know, you two that have been down and seen the cars backed out and the cars trying to get out onto a 4-lane highway with an emergency exit, with an emergency lane on the side and a turning lane in the middle. You're looking at kicking, the industry standard is that you can put 1 car per lineal foot of tunnel an hour, plus or minus 15 to 20%. So if they build an 80-foot tunnel, which I'm just guessing off of the depth of the property and how it looks, they do an 80-foot tunnel, they have the possibility of pushing 80 cars an hour straight out on 1000 North at an intersection that is already categorized as a level E. That's scary because we already have the next intersection that is failing. And we have no options to do anything with 1000 North. We can't expand the roads because Pizza Factory's too close to the road. We can't, federal land owns the other part. What do we do there? It's been a fight that the city's had for a long time about what to do with 1000 North. So what I would hate to see is, as I've worked so diligently with the Chamber of Commerce and as a Chamber board member, and know how much slack the city took when this development started and hit the dead end, is that now all of a sudden that it's up and roaring, we lose people that would rather go 5 miles north where it's not congested instead of coming 3 miles south to Spanish Fork. And as a business leader in this community, that worries me because that is a lot of traffic that is going to get pounded out within 500 feet of a stoplight on a 2-lane road. There's no answer to that. So far that I've heard as I've tried figuring out what can be done. They're queuing, stacking, it all lines up great and perfect. I mean, it's not going to be, but it's that exit, it's that egress. It's dangerous, and I think it puts the city at a liability. My suggestion or my recommendation would be to have an independent, you know, to table it, send it back to DRC, have an independent traffic study done, an independent sound study, because out there on the street, that's not telling you what's happening on the property. It's not telling you the decibel levels of where you're at the back of the property where those blowers are. So, you know, I would recommend tabling it, send it back to DRC, get an independent study on the traffic, an independent study on the sound, and change the C2, change to a C2, because if we change to a C2, it's open game. Even if something doesn't work out with this, it's open game for anybody underneath C2. Where they can cause, there's a lot of businesses underneath the C2 besides car wash full service. There's car wash coin operated that's not C2, car wash full service that is under C2. There's other businesses under C2 that'll cause this same problem. It's not just the car wash full service. And so I think we need to have those studies and have those findings and change the zone when the applying company does not exceed the standards that the independent study has found.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the citizens, from staff?
Some of the concerns that were brought up by Brent, I guess I could speak to a little bit to try and help. This is a...
Let's just not turn it into a debate.
Okay, I won't. I'm just going to help clarify some stuff. I mean, I think hopefully I provide enough information to where if you read through it, you could get a good idea or better idea of what we're trying to propose here. But it's actually called an express wash. It's not a full service where you have people parking on site and getting out of their vehicles and going in and paying or.
Do you think there's a difference between full serve and express when it comes to the exit though? I mean, the tunnel is the same, right? So it's the same amount of people coming out, whether
There
it's
is.
self-serve or full serve?
It's quicker because there's less options, so every 30 seconds, you should have a car entering, which will allow the cars to go in quicker. As you saw on there, that there's been studies done internally where, averaging 5 minutes on site, each vehicle. So you're moving vehicles through a lot quicker. We're not proposing, the washes that we do don't necessarily invite and bring more traffic. It's to service the traffic there. It's an impulse buy, because it is express. It's quick and easy. You're in and out. So we've looked at those as far as the egress and ingress and made sure that the capacity of the wash and the way it's set up according to the other 21 locations in operation currently, that the way it's set up will handle those cars fast enough to keep them from backing up through into Costco and whatnot. So,
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or no? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. Any questions for staff from the team?
What are the permitted uses in a C2 zone? Can you review that with us?
Yeah. Quick second. Really intended to be our retail zone, but we allow for some other things as well. I'll take a deep breath here and just go through them real quick. Art galleries, child care centers.
I am.
Yeah, it's 22. I can do that.
Just to put on your auctioneer hat, you grew up in Nebraska, you ought to be used to that.
Art galleries, child care centers, churches, private clubs, entertainment uses, that'd be like theaters, miniature golf, that kind of a thing. Financial institutions, hotels, motels, medical facilities, office supply companies, printing businesses, just regular professional offices, personal service businesses, so that would be everything from a nail salon to a real estate office. Any of that kind of stuff. Different things that we as the city need, like utility facilities. And then the main things, restaurants, retail uses. Those are the dominant things that we see in the C2 zone. But we also allow for certain types of businesses that do repair work, bike shops, that kind of a thing, or maybe even a small appliance shop. Instructional studios, that'd be dance studio, mathnasium, that sort of a thing. Lube centers, tire centers, convenience stores, car washes, and that's really it when it comes to uses.
So if they would proposed a steakhouse there, we'd be passing it like that, right?
That would have been a special meeting.
I'd like to just, I mean, it has nothing to do with, it does have something to do with this, but I think I'd like to make a suggestion that I'd like to propose a working group that we review these, because when they're reading these, there are items on that list that are traffic intense and some that are not. They should be in the same category in my eyes. There are things on that list that are noisy and some that are quiet. There are things on that list that are, I guess in my eyes, more industrial and more retail. I almost think we need to review that list and have a working group to do that, because when you're reading through that, I think there's a lot of diversity, and I think it needs to be not so diverse, I guess.
I think it might be good, maybe zoom out a little bit, a little bit, and just look at the areas of the city that are zone C2. So this is going to be the red that you see, and you'll recognize, just how diverse it really is on the ground relative to what properties are zone C2 and what the different uses are in that zoning district.
So the red is C2.
I'm glad you brought this up, because this kind of illustrates what I was going to say too. And again, I'm not making a formal motion, but I want the team to kind of know what I was leaning towards. Is I'm leaning at declining the zone change, and it has nothing to do with the car wash. To me, it's not my decision, or I guess it is my decision, but it's not my thought process, is what I'm saying. I don't know that we're ready to expand. We already got tons of inventory of C2 that is not being utilized in the city. And then even though we have all made comment that we know that this potentially down the road is going to go that direction, I'm not sure that it's the right time. That's my thought, is that yes, it will go that way down the road, but until we get, there are so much commercial property that in inventory existing right now, and with 1,000 North struggling already, I don't know that it's the right time to do the zone change. Again, my decision has nothing to do with the car wash, and I want you guys to know that. From a planning perspective, I don't know it's the right time to change that. I know it's coming. It might be a year down the road. It might be 3 years. It might be 6 months. I don't think it's the right time to make that change.
Why? Why do you think that?
Because we have a saturation of inventory already that's not used because of traffic problems on 1000 North. And I think that we have, if we had an inventory that was already full and it was time to expand, and I think it's time to expand. I don't think we're at that point yet.
And what are you basing that on? The idea that we're saturated?
We're not saturated is what I'm saying. I mean,
Or
we
sorry,
have
that
plenty
we're
of, we have
saturated
plenty
with
of
vacant.
inventory available.
Honestly, I hear the opposite weekly, maybe not daily, but certainly several times a week, about people that are trying to find property that's zoned
Well,
C2 that's available that they can't
You mean
find.
you mean property that's available not under the control of a developer?
Single developer.
Yeah.
People
I
that
mean-
want to do business in town but can't because property's not available and zoned for the use that they want to put it to. I mean, I would agree that, that's a valid way to look at it, but honestly, that's not the experience that our office has week in and week out.
When
That
you
there's
drive
a
around,
surplus.
when you drive around this whole area, there is tons of C2 space that's available that's currently not full.
Canyon Creek, I mean, that's not really there for anybody that wants to do business in town. To
Why?
occupy and,
You trying to tell me that if somebody goes to Woodbury Corporation and says, I want to purchase property on part of your development?
yeah, that's an obstacle for a lot of people that want to do business in town.
What obstacle are you referring to? Money?
That Woodbury has a very specific agenda and plan for their development. And Brad, I mean, I appreciate the perspective, but, again, like I mentioned earlier, we have some commercial resources that we'll be using here shortly that we haven't used in the past. And I think they probably could shed some light on the myth that there's some overabundance of properties that are available for non-residential use in Spanish Fork.
What's the plan, with the growth that's anticipated, whether or not this car wash goes in or not? We know that's gonna develop in that area. Is there any plans for the road to further improve safety and movement?
Our master plan shows it as a 5-lane facility which is built.
Has anybody got statistics on that road and what, comparatively speaking, how close it is to reaching its maximum potential as far as being safe and all of that? I'm just wondering where we're sitting right now on that road. If you go C2 along that road on the south side all along, obviously then that will, whether the car wash becomes a destination or not, or whether it's just existing traffic, that might be debatable. But C2 will bring additional traffic, and I'm just wondering where we're to on that road. Can it accommodate it, or can't it? Or do we know?
The study that was done, like as when Costco came in, or before that time, is about the most recent study we have. It has not been updated. I'm not sure what level the I-Corps project was at and cutting off access between Main Street Canyon Road. While it's congested, there's still capacity there, but where it gets into is more access control. You'll see what was done at 5th East with limiting left turns. While that's inconvenient for a lot of people, accidents drop down, traffic's flowing better. You don't see the backup into the commercial like you did before, so
So you still
I don't
have
want
some
to paint
things.
too good a picture because yes, it's busy. We don't have the shoulder we like. We have the challenges that were already mentioned with the pizza factory and limited right of way to do that. I think the next step would be short of just widening and as we typically get into site plans and drill down accesses, we look at, we talked in DRC about, boy, is this a right out only? Could it handle a left? We've thought about, and this would be all intersections along here, but this lane is a through and this is a through right. Do we need a turn pocket so we have 2 throughs? That's really something that study you'd need to get on an intersection level that I guess we don't have a current study at this point.
What plans do we have for the development of the off-streets right there, like 400 that you mentioned on that road? Are there any plans for those off-streets? I mean, I access the Costco and Macy's, I've tried different streets at different times. I can sit on that light at 400 and 1000. I swear it's the longest light in the city next to Canyon and Main Street.
You're right.
It is the longest light ever. Is there plans for why that is, or to open up those roads a little bit, or?
Specifically 400 East we struggle with, and I can't tell you how many times I've stood out there with equipment hooked up to and see that it picks up every car, and then you walk away and get a call the next day that it's not working. I don't know if it's lighting. I think our next step that we need to head towards and working on is getting different equipment on that light specific, but that's not really the conversation. But I mean, the one thing with development that you'll notice is versus look at the amount of driveways here. Those conflict points are really what cause problems trying to get in and out of traffic. We don't have shoulders, which creates a bigger problem with those access points, but where it's developed, you'll see an access at a light here. Now I know people don't follow it well, but this is a right in, right out. And then you don't have another access into Costco till a signalized intersection, and that gets down to that control. Now, you move on to Macy's and it's difficult because it's been there so long and it's a little bit harder to take away accesses. If it were to redevelop, then yeah, that's kind of more fair game, but you have full movement close to an intersection with no shoulder to give a buffer space. Full movement. This one we were able, because of some redevelopment, to get rid of this this access point, which has made an impact, but is there one easy fix? No. I mean, it's going to continue to be a problem as traffic grows, as commercial does.
Can you zoom that out just a bit? I just want to, when we look at that section, as far as development goes, kind of going back to what Brad said, and I don't know the numbers of who owns what and what developers doing what where. This is the side that's developing, and obviously there's interest on this side, and the pizza factory, then you have the auto store, O'Reilly. Townhomes are actually a perfect mix use for it, and people will rent them whether there's noise or not. The church is the perfect fit, and then you have more retail on the other side. So to me, that little section in there is the perfect place for change. And for the first steps to happen, it's not going to be easy for anybody who lives in that area. It's going to be hard, but it's already happening on either side of those 3 blocks. It's already taking place. It already is there. So to say that it's not the right time, I don't 100% agree with that, at least in that section. And
That's
we're
what
not
makes
deciding,
our group so good, is because we're diverse.
Yeah, we're not deciding if it should be a car wash or not, right? We're deciding if a C2 zone change should exist in that area.
and we're opening the door for,
Whatever.
maybe they
A car
won't
wash
build a
and
car wash,
go
maybe
on.
something else will go in there, but
And-
we were just saying, is it the right time? And I agree, I think that's what you're boiling down to, is it the right time?
I just think there's opportunity with development, even traffic-wise. And just to reiterate, or to what we were looking up a minute ago, is because you said Woodbury had a very specific agenda. Firehouse Wash is on the Woodbury, in American Fork. It's part of their design. We just looked it up. So if you go to the Woodbury development, and I can't really think of it in American Fork, Firehouse Wash is part of their development.
I think Woodbury might have plans for
So
a
to
car
say that they don't
wash.
want a car wash in their development
Oh,
here
no,
would not be
no.
right.
I think they may have plans for a car wash here.
Hmm.
I'm just saying, Brad, again, availability of land for commercial uses,
Look
somebody
at all
wanting
that
an
empty
acre.
pads.
Dave,
Brad,
if you were to look at the intensity.
come and spend some time in our office anytime. You're more than welcome.
If you were to look at the intensity of uses for non-residential uses, taking out industrial, of course, is there a scale in terms of intensity that you could lay out for us from C2 to C, whatever those all are? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, that's a great, I think, way to look at something like this. And
Because I guess I still view this as a buffer. We're talking about creating, mixed use. That's, again, going back to your comment earlier on a different item, that the mixed use is intended to be a buffer. And so, I mean, my leanings is to say, let's leave C2 north of 10th North, still allow for a diversity of uses as you make your way south, but it has to make that transition into the residential neighborhood, because none of us, I don't think, want to destroy the traditional grid blocks too far, from First North, or 10th North, excuse me.
yeah, I think it's always been talked about that between 10th North and what, right?
Right.
9th, 8th. We've seen some things even that suggest maybe a little bit further south even to that.
Kind of a transition.
There would be, and like I mentioned, I think to start with, that's the real trick, is coming up with the right way and the right place to do that. And of course, we're talking about an evolution of land uses, decades, right? I mean, something that, and frankly, I don't think it'll ever necessarily stop. There's always going to be recycling and different things that'll happen. I will say that I believe there will be retail uses on 10th North on each side. I mean, that's inevitable. And, the question of timing, I think that's a very appropriate thing to ask. And just relative to the intensity of different land uses, typically there are two factors, I think, that drive how we look at land use. And by intensity, I think typically we're talking about the impact that use has on the surrounding area. Trip generations, probably top of the list, I think, in terms of impact, and then you are looking at things like noise. So however you wanted to design that hierarchy, and obviously within both our industrial zone and our commercial zoning districts, there's a pretty broad range of uses that would develop, such that different levels of traffic would be created, and noise and everything else. But certainly in the C2 zone, some of the more intense uses are allowed. Convenience stores, Chick-fil-A's, different things like that, that are among the highest. Costco's, Walmart's, lots of different things like that that are already contributing to the corridor that we're talking about.
How about even a whole design concept? I mean, obviously, museum, but maybe to, I guess, reduce, I'm not a traffic person, I'll just push that out there, but what if this road wasn't even there, that this was all one big block? Does that cause problems over here? But I mean, if that road wasn't there, I would be.
That's for me, because that's the road I travel to get.
Oh, so now it's personal. Now it's personal. But I mean, we're talking about traffic on 1000 North, and we know eventually this will be commercial too, if not tonight. Is that even a thought process to take this road out to eliminate the congestion here?
That's a great idea.
He's all on board.
I think what that does, and it's a balance, but you're pushing that conflict somewhere else. This being a signalized intersection, me would say that road should be wider if we're having problems, not take
Yeah.
it out. And then places like Fifth where we're limiting access, well, that's where you take it out and direct people to the signals, and you want a consistent spacing.
Just seems like it would force traffic going one way instead of multiple ways, so I mean, you just,
Yeah, but then you're concentrating flows, I mean, and
that's why you get
there's
paid
a
the
lot
big
to it,
bucks.
but spreading out traffic and block systems work well
Mhm.
versus concentrating to one point. And then you have intersection gridlock, which, while traffic's busy, intersections is where you lose your time.
I don't
And
know.
having better access, and it's an access management, I think, issue with restrictions but a signalized would be the road we want to push people to, not away from.
Makes sense.
I don't know if you've ever been to San Diego and gone to either Qualcomm Stadium or Petco Park.
Many times.
Those things. There's a huge difference in the way traffic works at Petco because of the grid system compared to Qualcomm Park, or Qualcomm Stadium, excuse me. So I think, just reiterates what Corey's saying.
And it's a balance, it really is.
Yeah.
It's unique to everything, and
Now you're comparing stadiums to car washes.
Chairman, I actually think that this corridor is ready for C2 myself. I think there's problems with no shoulder. I think there's problems with those poor folks that has lived there their whole lives, and I know a lot of them that's lived there their whole life, and they've had to adapt to the whole North Park going away, and now they're down the road of commercial, and they're stuck with living with a very busy road there. I think C2 it's just waiting to happen. Whether it's a car wash or not, I think the traffic will dictate the traffic will dictate change. And if it gets catastrophic, the city will do something about it. They got to do something about it. If it's designed for a fifth.
But can they? They've
already
I asked
got
that very
in their
respectfully
master
because
plan,
we've identified other issues and they just flat out said, there's nothing more they can do, right?
Well, in their
The
master plan, they've got
opportunity is
5 lanes there, and they're not there yet. So that would be the next step, wouldn't it?
the what?
If your master plan shows 5 lanes there.
There is 5 lanes.
Oh, there is 5 now.
Now shoulders and things help, but opportunity, well, I don't know if opportunity is the word, but when things redevelop, that is the good opportunity for the city to look at. Do we need a little more shoulder room? Do we need a right turn pocket? In my review of zoning, I didn't get into the nitty gritty of traffic, and I'll speak for myself, because typically I look at a site plan issue, and when we build the site, we don't want to box ourselves in. At a zoning as well, though, I think it's an appropriate time to say we have concerns about traffic, and we know you want a car wash, which concerns us. I think it's appropriate to mention that and bring that up. But part of the site plan process, we would look at a traffic study if we feel like that's too late and it should be at a zoning, but, we can certainly do that.
And they haven't presented a site plan yet.
They've given concepts to represent what they'd like to do there,
But we're
which I
just
think is
approving the
appropriate.
zone change, not
Yeah.
anything else. They still have to go through that process.
I think in the next week and a half, they're planning on submitting a site plan.
And then you guys
depending
do
on-
all that.
And frankly, I mean, even though noise is a concern, it's gonna be C2, and that falls in the C2, so we really can't control that. If we visualize that moving to C2 down the road, and that car wash falls in that category, we can't really control that.
No.
So the question is really, not even the car wash per se.
Right.
It is really, do we want a C2 or don't we want a C2? And traffic is valid. And if we don't want traffic, then we can look at an alternative zone that still represents the downtown area. Residential office is one, can you help me with maybe something else to C2 that might fit that bill?
We don't have another zone that allows for the diversity of uses as the C2 zone. We
Mhm.
really don't. We have some other zones that obviously allow for some non-residential uses. Shopping center and C2 are really the main zoning districts that you'd expect to see along a corridor like this one. I just wanted to mention something relative to traffic, and you know how often that is discussed as a concern, and you know, we know that traffic at different intersections in town will get worse before it gets better, and it's constantly a challenge that we have to deal with. Fortunately, perhaps along this corridor, however, I think the big trip generators, they're there. You know, Macy's, Costco, the fact that you have to go on 10th North, you know, to get from Main Street to certain parts of the community, you know, even from US 6 to, you know, a big part of the community and different things like that. I really don't see that, you know, whether it's the Woodbury development, as they finish what was going to be Home Depot here, the shops, additional stores being occupied here, or development happening here, you know, that's going to make a pretty minuscule contribution in terms of trips that are going to be generated compared with what exists today, or just otherwise with growth in the community. So, you know, again, boy, it's something that, like Corey said, we struggle with in different ways, but I think these relatively insignificant incremental things that we see by way of the changes, they're just not, it's not going to be a big deal.
Can you confirm that during the DRC meeting that, I mean, they've approved the traffic, but that they did discuss the 60 to 80 vehicles potentially per hour out of that area?
We did not discuss that, yeah. That I remember. Might be wrong.
We talked about traffic, but not a number.
I think we looked a little bit at stacking, like how many vehicles potentially they could have in the different queues that they have on site. And, you know, I've got to admit, relative to exactly what the capacity is, I'm pretty ignorant there.
Huh. And just for the sake of, I guess, not beating this up all night long, I think we have kind of, in my eyes, 3 options, and there's probably more, well, 4 options. We could propose an alternative zone. We can accept the zone the way it is now, recommend a decline or recommend an approval. Or we can table it and have them go back to the DRC where they review the traffic one more time. I think we need to realize that ultimately the plan or the vision is for that to become C2 eventually. So is later different than now, is whatever that might be. So anyways, those are my kind of my thoughts. I mean, we can, I guess we can, to me, we can't focus too much on that, the car wash. Right now it's about a zone change.
I have a traffic question. I mean, along 1000 there, are we even close to being at concerned capacity levels?
What's the level of service at those intersections, do we know?
I don't know current level of service, and that's something we ought to look at. We can pull out studies to see what they projected. A little bit of that, our master plan was based on some 2008 count data that then we projected out. 2008.
I say that's, which has changed dramatically.
Changed dramatically, so that's something as we're looking at updating our master transportation plan of putting in, which could change that. I would say while we're busy on 1000 North and it is inconvenient, and I avoid it, I come across and feed up through like it sounds like a lot of you do. Sometimes that's not bad, having people get forced other ways to spread out traffic, rather than creating bigger and bigger facilities. But yes, there's concerns there and things that need to happen. We've taken them case by case, you know, again, I'll point to 5th East. We saw a concern. We got traffic engineers, you know, a couple involved and said, what's the answer? Is it a signal? Is it restricting access? And we vetted that out pretty heavily and I think came up with a good answer that's worked. Now, I'm not sure that'll work everywhere along there, but I see that as the next phase. I don't see the viability of widening the whole road, and I'm not sure that that would fix everything. I see it more as access control. Certainly as things redevelop, looking at intersections and can we increase capacity, because that's where it's at. It's at intersections and conflict points in and out, controlling that. 5 lanes, if you have, I mean, there's portions of I-15 that are 2 lanes in each direction, and there's just no access, so it can handle a lot of cars. So it's really down to that intersection control.
Well, I just want to say, I don't want anybody to hate me out there in the world or anything, but compared to other 5-lane roads that I've traveled on in commercial areas, that's not that congested of an area. I've traveled on 5-lane roads that have 50 cars lined up at a stoplight. Here I've never sat behind more than 4 or 5 cars at a stoplight. So I don't want anybody to get mad at me, but I feel like the thing that makes it safest is that the people who are driving on it drive safely. And that hopefully the citizens of Spanish Fork would recognize that that's a growing part of our community that's going to have congestion, and we can't expect to travel on that road to Macy's and other areas like we did 5 years ago, when we could just zoom right in and out. It's changed. And it doesn't matter if we approve this or not, that congestion's just going to increase. And we need to make it safe by being safe drivers, not, I don't know, making the road bigger. So I just want to throw that out there. Concerns about traffic in that area, then we just need to be good drivers.
Corey, are my findings incorrect? There is one intersection already failing on 1000 North, and that intersection at 400 and 1000 is level E, to where the next step is failure?
I'm not sure I've seen a study, and maybe I haven't researched, but I have not seen a study that, to my knowledge, we've had no counts on this road since Costco came in. We do have, UDOT access to UDOT that automatically collects information at each end of 1000 North, and yes, it's a lot of cars. In between, I'd love to see a study if there was. I'm not aware of one. The only study we had, there was a traffic study produced with this piece that was going to be Home Depot and what you see there. It showed that 5th East would be at build out of the commercial a level of service E. To give perspective, we all go to A is good and F is fail. In the traffic world, and I deal with traffic, but I'm not a full traffic engineer. They say if you have an intersection, if you build a new project and you've got a level of service A or B, you probably overbuilt and spent too much money.
That's exactly my concern.
We're looking for that C or D type frame that says you're about where you should be. That's as it's been represented to me. As this study was done, it did show the 5th East intersection coming out of the commercial at a level of service E at build out. And their justification in the study was, well, as that gets worse, people will use these other accesses to get out. The trouble we had where we really ran into problems is the only access out of there onto 4th East made you turn right. So you could not get out to 1000 North without, and head to Highway 6 or Walmart without either flipping a U-turn or driving through gravel or, braving this scary intersection. Since then, we've worked with the developer. They've, put the median in. They've also put in another access where you can come out and turn left. And even after those were built, you saw traffic backing up clear into the intersection inside, and it was still miserable. Well, if you go up there today with the access control and months of people learning, you don't see cars back up in there because they're all turning right, and they can get in and out. So it was a failure, absolutely. And we saw accidents, and we saw several cars go on the wrong side of the median. And I mean, it was scary, it really was. Now, did we solve the capacity issue? No, we created a safer spot for people to get in and out. So that, I'm not sure how to answer that. For a full intersection, yes, it failed. As an access control, it's okay, and we're forcing people, again, over to the signal where you get a permitted time to turn left, you know. But it's a matter of perspective. 1000 North is busy, and for Spanish Fork, it is very, very busy. You go to other places in the county, and 1000 North, as mentioned, maybe isn't as bad as some of those. Now, is that acceptable to us or not? That's an answer we need to come up with. But yes, as things develop, yeah, we're gonna have to look at intersections. We're gonna have to look at shoulders and build that in. Absolutely. So I would picture as any land use changes on either side of the road in a significant manner, we need to look at traffic studies and what is that, what impact and what do we need to do to mitigate that.
So, I'm gonna make a motion.
Brian, can I make a comment real quick, please?
Go ahead, Dallas.
Thanks. A couple things. First, I live up the road, not very far from here, so I want to tell Corey, I was one of the people backing up over here, Corey, on the, where they put the median, because you have to learn it, right? So and, you know, that little access to go around and come out 400 East really helps now, because, you know, you come to the stoplight and get out your turn. A couple of things I wanted to point out is that when we talk about C2 zone that's already come down to 900 North here, and it's come across, you have the Technoglass, you know, obviously Cal Ranch, Technoglass, and O'Reilly that's brought into this area. That it makes sense to me that to generate more traffic through here, you got to have some more retail use, right? That actually brings traffic. Like I mentioned earlier, this type of car wash as express is takes advantage of the traffic that's existing and doesn't become a destination like a Wiggy Wash that's a full service detail. It's a destination location. You get in your car to drive there to get your car done. This is an impulse buy, it's an express wash, so you take advantage of the existing traffic to not add additional traffic. But when this develops over here, or a Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever Woodbury decides to put into the rest of this development, or maybe Dave knows what that is going to generate.
He wishes.
Whatever.
Can't happen fast enough, right?
Whatever is going to come in here is going to generate a lot more traffic than this little car wash. Now, I wanted to speak to the concerns of one of the citizens as well, because I put it in the packet and I hope you had a chance to look at it. But as far as noise goes on a car wash, if you look at it, the study's been done by this Bullard Acoustical Consultants Incorporation that did a study on the existing car wash in one of the residential areas that has residential that probably won't go away in the near future. If you look at it on a 90-degree angle, 25 feet away, your max decibel is 70. Now remember, 1000 North is creating 90 decibels of traffic as it sits right now. As you come up the road, yes, it reduces, but the lowest at those times we were there was 65, at the lowest, 65 decibels. We're at 70, 25 feet away, which is still another 80 feet from our property line. And if you go to 45-degree angle, 25 feet, you're at 78 max decibels and an average of 67.
So I appreciate that, but I don't think noise is our primary concern.
Okay, I was just telling
our primary
one of the
concern here
citizens.
is traffic, and
I wanted to speak to one of the citizens concerned about noise. And then
I don't say it's not a concern. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just saying it's not our primary concern.
Okay, and then the traffic, I just want to make sure you understood it's not a traffic generator. It just takes advantage of the traffic that's existing. Now, my partner owns this piece of land right here on the corner across from the Stake Center as well. It's a similar sized lot right here. We have plans to put a retail building there. In fact, we had a retail building planned here, you know, we would have submitted to the city already. But that is the plan for this area here. So if you get a, you know, submittal for C2 zone there for a small retail building, it fits in the C2 zone as well. So then, Mrs.
Would 80 cars per hour be better coming out of this corner versus this corner? No.
I'm sorry.
Would 80 cars per hour or 60 to 80 coming out of this corner be better than this corner?
Similar issue. I guess traffic signal could play an impact on that.
Let's describe the right in, right out too.
Yeah, we discussed in the DRC Dave and Corey, that at that, as you can see on your site plan, that's an exit only out of the car wash onto 1000 North. So if we made a right,
I saw that.
right out, you know, only, they keep them from crossing traffic on 1000 North.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
You had it.
I was gonna make a motion, but
I was gonna say, really, you'd have to get to the level of counting cars and modeling to know if an intersection is better than the other.
so I think I'd like to make a motion that we table this discussion and send it back to DRC and asking them to look at specific traffic issues in terms of generation that this would provide. The possibility of accessing or exiting, excuse me, this facility from on 4th East versus up on 10th North like it is currently. So basically flipping it to see if that's beneficial or not.
That way and out on.
Yeah, so you're in on 10th North and out on 4th East, so that it forces you then to go use that intersection.
Actually do a U-turn on that to get back to 1000 North. That was my complaint.
Say that again, sir, I'm sorry.
If they were forced to turn right onto 400 East, they would do a U-turn in my driveway and go back to 1000 North.
So no, my thought is that you would come out of the car wash and turn left going north to get to 10th North.
Okay. But with it so close to that, the intersection there, that's gonna be a problem when cars are lined up.
Either way, it's gonna be a trial.
Yeah. I still think having it down on the south end of that, it's just, like I said, I just want you to look at it.
We can study both. I
Yeah,
think that's
Just look at the design to see,
Yeah.
to have it flip-flopped.
The other thing is if that building, I know this is a site plan specific thing, but if you flip-flop that building and have the exiting going north, it puts the loudest noise of those dryer, or the blowers, going towards Costco and not towards the residential development. Just another thought there. And then the other element is just have discussion on the required buffers to the R16 zone that's neighboring. There was a comment about not planning for some kind of a masonry fence, but I think that's required between a commercial and an R16 zone, if I remember correctly, Dave. So, long-winded motion, I apologize.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Fallon. We have a second by Commissioner Tagg. Let's do a roll call vote unless there is another motion opposing that. So Commissioner Tanner.
So we could make another motion, is what you're saying?
We gotta vote, you have to vote on this motion first. If it fails, then a new motion can be made.
I see. I vote nay to that.
Aye.
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 I'll go aye.
And then Commissioner Tanner, can you expand on your nay, please?
Yeah, I voted nay because I feel like the time is right to change the zoning to C2. I think some of these issues could be brought up with the planning and the design concerns, but I think the real issue was, is it time to do C2, irregardless of if it's a car wash or a bakery or an office complex. And I think it's time for that area to be C2.
Okay. We will move to the next item on the agenda tonight. Which is a annexation for the Nelson annexation. So if I can hear from Mr. Anderson, please, from staff.
The best image to use to look at this is probably the aerial photo there. I mentioned earlier tonight the Stillman annexation that was approved a year and a half or so ago, just to the north and west of the subject properties here. Really with the approval of that annexation and different issues that we worked through relative to getting power and sewer and so forth, again on the east side of 2550 East, the heavy lifting's been done. So it's been pretty easy to look at this annexation and these properties, understanding that utilities essentially will be at the doorstep of them to facilitate development. And historically, our position's been that we won't seriously consider annexing properties. At least the typical approach is that we won't get to that point to seriously consider annexations until there's some type of development potential existing. And with, again, the issues that have already been addressed, it's easy to see that these properties are pretty ripe now for development. We understand that there's one developer in particular that, in fact, I think they've submitted a preliminary plat application for some of the properties in the annexation area. So all of that being said, it's been pretty easy to review this proposal, I think, for us as staff, and to recommend that the proposed Nelson annexation be approved. Now, you realize also that with annexations, we talk about zoning, and I kind of took a minute before back on the Bridle Creek Ridge, what's it called?
Bridle Creek.
Bridle Creek.
Just Bridle Creek. On that other subdivision that we looked at over here, that at least in theory, I think it makes sense to consider First South to be the good delineation between R112 zoning, like what we've already assigned to the north, and R115 to the south. And I just reiterate that because I'm pretty sure that the next development proposal that we're going to get will be for a R112 subdivision on the south side of First South. So again, it'll be staff's position, at least initially, that the proposed zoning south of First South be R115, but like I've said, north of First South, R112, so that's what we've recommended be assigned at the time of annexation.
So just, does it come back for that to assign those zones, or is it, so we annex it first and then it'll come back to us?
Nope, as part of the annexation process, zoning gets assigned, so you'll make a recommendation on both things tonight, the annexation and the zoning of the property.
And we're okay with proposing R12 across the street on the north and 15, that's, I mean, just what you just said, but we're in agreement that those are different and that's the plan?
Well, and I guess I say that kind of too, looking maybe for a little bit of feedback. That's how we've looked at it, and I don't know how many of you were on the commission back when these properties here were annexed. Back then, that was our discussion, that as you move closer to the mouth of the canyon, going away from Maple Mountain High School, that eventually we should see larger and larger lots. So when those properties were annexed again, R115 zoning was assigned. In fact, Corey, you might turn that on. So you can see how R115, and we just expect that pattern to continue, but for the maybe subject at hand, Nelson annexation, this has been zoned R112, and it seems to make sense to us, just again, to use First South all the way over the tracks as the delineator.
You okay with that?
Isn't that what we want?
I kind of lean to think R115 would be just as good.
Oh, for that even?
For that
Okay.
even, yeah. I mean, can you scroll up a little so we can get closer to see Highway 6?
I'm wondering if you even split it, and we say, I don't want to confuse it, but there you go, maybe 15 along the railroad tracks and 12 internally.
And you think, and if the Spanish Works goes all the way to the railroad, I mean, and eventually you plan for it to go all the way to the railroad tracks, right?
You can see
the blue shade is Mapleton.
Yeah, that's where
Oh,
Mapleton's already annexed to the east.
And they've got plans. Some of that I think is annexed now, but it's probably not.
Into
We've
Mapleton.
got some old maps.
And so south of Maple Mountain High School, that the yellow is I can't read it, so. Is that,
R115.
No, south
This
of
is
the high school.
R12.
R12.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm probably good either way. I just, just a matter of whether there's enough quantity of, I mean, that's conversation we've had on this commission. Whether we have enough lots in the city of enough size, and if we have the opportunity to get that at this stage, why not ask for it? I guess is my thought
I was
process.
wondering if we split it and, you know, continue this over maybe this line and then maybe a little different here or something.
I'm not- yeah.
Is building along railroad tracks make any difference in property values?
You know, inherently, I would think so. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen an appraisal or anything to identify what maybe the discount would need to be for property value adjacent to tracks, and maybe it's particularly a little bit further to the north in Mapleton. And it looks like they have quite a few homes that have been built on pretty large properties next to tracks.
Yeah, that's kind of where yeah, do we know what the zoning is on the other side of the tracks?
I
Mapleton?
don't. I mean, Mapleton, I think
They-
throughout much of the community, they have a 1
acre-
acre
Are they
minimum.
1 acres? Okay, so.
Yeah.
They're pretty homogeneous.
They're 1 acre minimums on the other side.
There's certain areas that have half acre.
That wouldn't surprise me.
It was 5 and they changed it 3 years ago, 2 years ago, just because I have acquaintances on the other side, so I'm familiar with it. I don't have a problem with the zone change personally. I am leaning more towards 15 than 12 though.
You do have a problem with the zone change, did you say?
I do not have a problem with the annexation. I like it, but I would lean towards proposing 15 versus 12.
Okay.
This is a public hearing, or you want me to open it up for public hearing?
For the annexation.
For the annexation.
Thanks for the reminder. Thank you. So should we go ahead and open it up first, and then we'll have more discussion?
I'll
Okay.
make a motion that we open up public hearing.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak about the annexation for Nelson? I'll take a motion to close it.
So moved.
All right. So any more discussions? Anybody want to make a motion? Any more questions?
Is this recommendation of approval to the city council?
On both the annexation and the zoning.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the annexation with the zoning to be R115 to the city council for the Nelson annexation.
We have a motion by Commissioner Fallon,
I'll second that.
a second by Commissioner Tanner. Do a roll call vote with Commissioner Wilkinson.
Aye.
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 We will move to the next item on our agenda for the night, which is a Title 15 amendment. It is a public hearing as well, request for an infill overlay. I don't know if the word request is the right word to do, but.
This is a text amendment, so the proposal is to change Title 15. And I'm just gonna zero in on the language that we change. So I think it speaks for itself. This might be good to talk about the numbers and how they shake out a little bit, like we talked about a little bit earlier tonight. Right now, the number of units that you can have in an infill overlay project is tied to the general plan. And essentially, that means you can have either up to 8 units to the acre in an infill overlay project if your property is designated medium density residential on the general plan, which a good part of the properties in the city that are zoned R16 are designated medium density residential, so that's 8. But then for areas where the general plan calls for high density residential, you can go up to 12 units to the acre. And the impetus for this change is to allow for a little bit higher density in infill overlay projects. So rather than to continue to build upon this relationship that our zoning code has with the general plan, we're simply suggesting that we change the standards so that the density is spelled out in the zoning code. So for that number of square feet that you see there, for properties that are either in the R3 or the R16 zone, you can have 1 dwelling unit. And lots of times we talk in terms of units per acre. Somebody can run the
That was
number
odd to me. That was-
again for me. And these numbers were generated with a very specific purpose. It was to allow a certain number of units on properties of a certain size. So And Bruce, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this would allow, instead of just 12 units to the acre as the highest density that would be allowed, you could be at 13.3. And on the other side of it, where now the ceiling is 8, you could have something like 9.4, 9.5. So
9.8.
9.8. So in my view, it's not a real big change, and that's by design. And if this change does anything for us, I think it's positive. Like we talked about again, I think kind of just being more specific in our zoning code about what density is allowed, rather than having the zoning code refer to the general plan like it does now. That's, I think, a good practice. So.
So there's more aligned with our zones versus general plan.
I think that's fair to say, yep. So the Development Review Committee has talked about this, reviewed it, and recommended that it be approved.
So how do you the terms arbitrary and capricious are two nasty terms in your business? And so 3260, I mean, what is that? If it's anything like some of the things I do, it's just kind of out of the air. So I'm just curious with the.
Took a property of a particular size and came up with a number there to match a number of units that we wanted to allow on that property and no more. So that's how generated it. Little bit of backwards, maybe math there.
When you say, because I have one property in mind that we're talking about, when you say 4,420 square feet, is that an individual property? Is that a development property? When you're using that square footage, what are you defining as that square footage of what, a project?
The size of the property in the project.
So there could be multiple parcels involved.
Yeah. Certainly.
That creates a project area.
As long as they were all developed by the same person, probably.
I'm just looking at, when you're looking at a block or an area, how are we defining that area? By owner, by developer, by
So you'd review an infill overlay project. That's what would be presented to you, and we'd simply check some math as part of the review that we do to see if it fits within those parameters there from a density perspective, just like we do now. I mean, the only thing that this really changes ultimately, when the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is that conceivably you could approve a project with more units in it per acre than what you could do if this doesn't get approved. Yeah, and again, you're not obligated to. You have tons of latitude and discretion. We say discretion, not anything that's ever arbitrary. And you have that latitude, and that's, I think, a very important part of the concept of an overlay and saying yes or no.
Does anybody make a motion for a public hearing, unless you have more questions for staff?
I'll make a motion for a public hearing.
Anybody in the public would like to address the commission?
Whatever you guys get paid, it's not enough.
Thanks.
We get paid nothing.
The fact that you stayed here, that means you don't get paid enough either.
My name's Paul Casey, and this change is in regards to what I'm looking to do with my property that's attached to my fourplex, which I have presented to you guys in the past. And I really don't know what else to say. I'm just trying to make it a better place. So hopefully Dave has written this that it fits your needs, fits the city's needs. Doesn't open up a huge problem for the city, but lets me create a fix for a piece of ground that is just a weed patch. So.
And this would allow you to build what?
A duplex.
Okay. And that'll fit your needs.
Yes, yeah, definitely fits my needs more than a single family dwelling home, which doesn't fit any needs in that area really, but.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got to hand it to you for hanging in there. as long as you haven't and going through the process that was required. If it reaches the fruition of what you're hoping.
You gotta work for what you want.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Okay, and if there's, the public hearing is now closed, is there a member of the commission that would like to make a motion, or is there further discussion needed?
Can I ask a quick question? With the infill overlay, and maybe this was already answered, but I thought I thought we've only talked about like zone changes and stuff like that. When infill overlay, if someone comes and asks that this fits their project or whatever, then we at that point have the ability to discuss details like accessibility and size. I mean, I don't know anything because it's kind of left in our lap to decide if that fits the area. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I'm just going to take a step back to try to clarify that. When somebody applies for project approval where they need the infill overlay, you and the city council have, again, complete discretion as to whether you approve that or not. You're not obligated at all to approve what really is a zone change for the infill overlay. So as you review, critique, examine that development proposal, you could look at any issues that you want to. It might be the color of a building. It might be access. It might be available parking. It might be what's next to it. Maybe all of those different things, other things. But certainly you could consider lots of different factors on a case-by-case basis in determining, again, whether you want to approve a project. Maybe it's a matter of approving a project but requiring it to be modified and different things like that. So that's something that, at least in the ideal way that I want to look at the infill overlay, I think is really important. The reality is that I could count probably on one hand the number of projects in the last 7 years that we've seen proposed with the infill overlay. And I think that's somewhat due to the fact that for 7 years the economy was pretty rough. And I think we're starting to see more of the kind of development activity that will lead to more infill overlay projects. But you could debate the pros and cons of this particular change. And I guess one thought that I honestly have is that, maybe allowing for a little bit more density will provide more people with an incentive to propose infill overlay projects. And again, case-by-case basis, you can review them and say thumbs up or thumbs down. One last thing that I want to mention about this, that it's late enough tonight that we won't spend much time on, but I gave you a copy of a document that I printed, which is actually a collection of documents that I think represent the best single collection of ideas and approaches to take to redevelop previously developed properties in older parts of communities that I've ever seen. I mean, it is outstanding. I think the thought process that went into it and the guidance that is offered in that document is tremendous. I shared that with our city council a few weeks ago in some meetings that we had, and it was very, very well received. So I guess actually one thing that I will suggest that we make some time to talk about here sooner than later is the idea that maybe there are other things we want to do with the infill overlay to encourage the types of things that I think we originally envisioned happening in the infill overlay, but that yet we still really haven't seen take off. So in fact, I think we shared that with everybody on a Google Drive. Is that the tool we used? Do you remember? You set it up for us. This was back before Christmas, so maybe.
Yes, I did create a Google photo. No, Dropbox is what you're thinking.
Is that what it was?
Dropbox.
Thank you. So, do you guys remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have access to that document, and you probably don't get as excited about this type of thing as I do, but man, this is, it's neat, great ideas. Enough said for tonight. Talk more about that later. That's a much longer answer than sorry.
That's great.
Okay. Any other discussion points?
I'll make a motion. Is that
What
all
would that
right?
motion be?
I'll make a motion that we approve the text change to the Title 15 info overlay. Is that?
Sounds great. I have a motion by Commissioner Tagg.
Well said.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Commissioner Fallon. And roll call vote with, starting with Commissioner Tanner.
Aye.
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 Next item on our agenda is Title 15 R4 zone.
I have a PowerPoint to bring up with that little circle.
Is this a long one, or should we table it to the next meeting?
Is it still coming?
Yeah.
Can I take
I'm
5
sorry,
minutes?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Casey.
Thank you.
It's giving me a headache.
I just,
It might be because I have it open upstairs still.
I just didn't know if it was a
I
long
just switched
discussion or
screens so
not,
I
because
could
we
put it up
tabled
and
it.
it's just.
Just give it a minute. It should eventually.
Man, who piled this much on us in one night? Slave.
I don't know that we've
I'm
had this
just
much
doing
in
what I'm
1 year.
told.
Jeez.
He's making up for months of.
Yeah.
For the
it's-
motion,
It'll
we
be
need-
interesting to see what happens.
We
in
need snacks if it's
2016.
lasting this long.
But it's pretty easy to see that it might be this way for a while. So, which back before, were you on the commission back before 2000? This was the norm, not the exception, for a long, long time. Yeah, this kind of activity. R4 zone. So in recent weeks, we've had an opportunity to sort of vet the language that we've put together with different developers. And in most cases, the developers that we've talked to have been, bona fide, very serious about doing a development project in Spanish Fork. So I know that they've really put their best foot forward by way of critiquing the document that we have. And I've frankly been very clear with them about my perspective, which is that, I'm really not looking for them to lobby me to go one direction or another with a particular standard. But I did want them to compare the language that we have in our draft with what their experience has been in other communities relative to what does or doesn't work. Asked them to kind of troubleshoot this, and they've come back with some points that have been very valid. So, in short, I'm going to ask that you continue this tonight. We have scheduled a public hearing, so you could hold that, and you could at least check that box off if you want. With that said, I do want to touch on a few of the particular things that have been raised as a concern with some of the current standards that we have. Minimum dwelling size, let's just start with that. So what I just passed out is something that Kim put together for us. After the concern was raised with the standard that we have right now in the current language, which is coming from other language that we have in the code right now that requires a minimum unit size of 900 square feet. Now, I don't know what the magic minimum should be. Frankly, I do think we need a minimum though. That is a minimum size in terms of square feet that an apartment would be in Spanish Fork. So again, right now, 900 square feet is our minimum. And we can see from some of these different floor plans that Kim collected for us that some of the projects that we looked at that we like have, they're typically one-bedroom units that are less than 900 square feet. Everything from, I think they're
actually some that have less than 600 square feet, but for example, this one's just about 700 square feet, 730, 780. One-bedroom units, and again, these are units that are in the projects that we saw and that we liked. Here again, obviously a different layout, 675 square feet, 760, closer to 800, 750. I was thinking that one of those was a two-bedroom. I guess those are all, yeah, this one, 1 to 2 bedroom.
Can I add,
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you, but if I'm trying to put this into context so that when you're explaining to me, I can better understand. Ultimately, are we looking at making sure that we are in comparison with other people? Because you've provided us some good notes here, but if I can understand what I don't like to use the word agenda because I don't think we have an agenda, but when we were discussing this, what's the desired outcome? I guess maybe that is.
You know, can I add something to that too? I mean, just from my perspective, and Dave, you can add, but you know, the bigger the unit, the more higher quality the unit's going to be. So I can see why you started with the 900 square feet.
That was fairly arbitrary.
Was it? Okay. You know, because you know it does set a particular standard in my mind for the quality of the unit. You're not going to stick a 550 square foot unit in a high quality necessarily.
And so maybe the word standard is what we're trying to achieve. I
think so. Yeah.
When I'm listening here, I'm trying to figure out what are we trying to achieve.
And it's simply, I'm looking for some feedback relative to what the minimum unit size should be.
Okay.
And I'm coming from the perspective of, okay, we looked at these projects, and you use the Outlook project in Springville as an example. Every developer that I've talked to, I've said, go look at that project, we like that. And so as they've done that, among the other things that I've heard feedback-wise is, that's great, but we couldn't build that exact project if we wanted to, because they have a certain number of units that are less than 900 square feet. So, you know, would you consider, and maybe, you know, one thought that I have at least is that perhaps we allow for a certain percentage of units in the project to be less than 900 square feet, which I understand is typically the case. Typically, you'll have a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And I think if we saw anything in the 500 square foot range, you know, probably more of a studio kind of thing, right?
Can we, like, make a minimum for each of those types of, like, 1 bedroom
I thought about
minimum, 2 bedroom minimum, 3 bedroom.
Okay, and I really like that. I like that, I think, more even than the percentage, personally.
That gives the developer some leeway to say, I want 25% ones, 50% twos, and 25% threes, and then the size is established based on that. I think I like that as well.
I like that a lot. And I guess what I'd suggest that we consider is looking at the projects that we have some data on now as examples. And we sort of model our standard after them. You know, again, with the understanding that we don't have data here on any of the dogs that we saw or the projects that we didn't like, you know, so to speak.
How about amenities that go with that square footage? If it's a 2 bedroom, it must have a garage. If it's a 3 bedroom, it must have a 2-car garage. Or, I don't know, can you assign amenities to that as well? Because we talked about 1 being this, 2 versus that.
We talk about amenities in terms of the project size, in terms of the overall project size, rather than, you know, how many 1-bedroom units they have or how large those units might be. So section 5 is all about the amenities, and just for example, and incidentally, I didn't get any complaints on this.
When you say complaints, is that referring to applicants?
This is the feedback that I received. Complaints is not the best word to use.
Okay, so
the feedback, I didn't get any negative feedback.
From applicants though, or from staff, or when?
Potential applicants.
Okay.
Is the best way to put it. Yeah.
I didn't know who your audience was that you were referring to.
So that's basically what I'm talking about tonight, is feedback that I got from potential developers. And you know, we can read through that certainly.
I'm game for any suggestions you have relative to amenities. And then we're talking about things like playgrounds, gardens, picnic areas, barbecue areas, swimming pools, sports courts,
This could be-
clubhouses, that type of thing.
This could be pretty complex.
We have put this together in the most simple way imaginable so far, yeah.
And better yet, I don't mean complex in a negative way. I'm looking at it, I wouldn't mind taking the time to make it somewhat complex, but propose it, maybe complex is the wrong word, but make it stringent. I mean, just that you have very defined, and I want it to be,
Setting the bar high.
yeah, set the
That's
bar
certainly
high.
the idea.
I'd like to take some time to do it right and,
That's certainly-
and do a lot of research and
Well-
come up with the perfect plan.
I'm gonna touch more on that as I get towards the end.
All right, I'll let you just
of my
talk.
5 minutes that I've blown, sorry. So anyway,
It's a Nebraska 5 minutes.
I'm just hearing more like freaking Texas 5 minutes or something like that.
Texas ordinance would be appropriate.
Okay, keep going.
That'd be like a New York 5.
We'll put something together along those lines that, you know, minimum square footage per bedroom, something like that. We'll break that back. Parking. Right now, we are at 2.5 parking spaces per unit in our code. That's with the proposed language, how it reads.
I think it should depend on the unit number of bedrooms in the unit.
Okay. So that's what we've heard from developers now.
I mean,
Right now,
that's typical.
that's typical. I agree.
You know, you might get one bed, you know, one parking stall per unit plus a half a stall for a visitor or something, or a quarter or whatever. And then it goes up from there.
That's a lot of times how we see it done. And the development community swears that that's the best way to approach it. And they say that they'll bring us in studies that show that, you know, they can adequately provide the number of parking spaces that are required if they approach it that way. My hangup is simply this: we've required 2.5 parking spaces for every project that the city's approved essentially in the past. And the number one complaint that I get about those projects, whether it's neighbors or people that live there, or somebody that's coming to complain about a project that's just proposed because they think we're gonna blow it so badly on parking that they attack us almost personally over parking requirements, is that 2.5 spaces hasn't been enough. So, practically speaking, I think what Bruce said is the right thing to do. I guess I'm making a big deal about talking about it because I'm skittish about not requiring enough parking after I've heard make sure there's enough parking so many times.
Could you just
From
take it
personal
up?
ex-
Could
from
you just
personal
take it up?
experience, I think when there's more parking, you'll attract I don't know how to say it, so it's politically correct, but I think you'll attract a higher clientele because people who maybe make a better living, I don't say better living, I don't know how to say this so it's politically correct, so I apologize if I offend somebody, but typically will have more than one vehicle. So if you have a lower income housing, your old people, and I'm not trying to be mean, but typically people might only have one car. And when you have a nicer area, you see people have multiple cars, they might even have RVs, they might have motorcycles that have things that go with it. So I'm just putting that out there that when you have more parking, you will attract a clientele that might not go there otherwise.
I think that's a very logical way to look at it. Yeah, honestly, I'm very open-minded by way of how we approach it. I will say this: if we're less than 2.5 parking spaces per unit, I want so many different fingerprints on that knife so that I can, you know, have some plausible deniability relative to the responsibility.
So
part.
they're saying that 2.5 is too much.
They are. Yeah.
No,
they're saying 2.5 is too much. That's
Developing
what
side of it, the world of it.
Our understanding that we've
In the
always
past,
heard it
well,
never
I've
not
gotten
differently.
complaints about, 2.5
Well, yeah.
not being enough.
That's all we've ever heard.
So you're getting complaints from who, 2.5 not being enough?
Neighbors.
Residents and neighbors both.
So you mean they're utilizing their space in the street or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of classic examples for us. Somerset Village out on Canyon Road. People talk about the 30 cars that are parked every night out on Canyon Road because they haven't.
Well, you know what happens, it's not the
Storage in the
tenant.
garage.
It's not the tenant. What happens is they have people that aren't on the contract that end up coming over. And then before you know it, you've got people, and these are in units that probably aren't quite as nice. Because, or people are saying, hey, move in here with me and pay part of the rent. So now you've got a lot more vehicles than what you thought you should have had with the tenants that were supposed to be in there.
Okay, and that I think is a good thing probably to point out, maybe to the developer's argument's credit. They will say, hey, we can manage that. So for example, if there's more occupancy in a unit than what their lease allows, they say, we will manage that. We will make sure that there's not a parking problem. Just don't make us provide 2.5 spaces per unit. Incidentally, we're probably just talking about the difference between 2.5 and 2.
Do we regulate guest parking as part of that parking, or is it?
Part of
That's
that,
usually that half.
Is it in
That's the half. That's exactly the theory, yeah. So assuming that most households
2 cars.
have 2, that's the typical, particularly when you're talking about some kind of multifamily, usually you don't have more than that. Then you have a half for guests. I guess maybe in the interest of time, we could take a look at what Bruce suggested, which is just how some other cities approach it. Maybe if you have one that you think particularly works and want to point us in that direction, we could look at that and bring it back and maybe in an earlier hour next meeting, talk about that. Garages, the garage right now requirement is such that there's got to be 1 garage for every unit. And for example, the project in Springville, they have garages for 80% of the units. And just in the little bit of snooping around that I've done, that seems like a pretty common number instead of 1 garage per unit. So I'm inclined on that one to probably give a little bit and not say that you have to have 100% garages for every unit.
So that's something they pay extra for, right?
They typically do. Yep. Any concerns with less than 100% as a starting point?
Well, I think back to Brad's point about what we're trying to create here is we're raising the bar.
Yeah.
And so in all of these things, even the parking requirements, if 2.5 isn't enough, maybe you go to 3, but it's because of the way we feel. We want this project to be a raised bar. We've got plenty of the other inventory. You know, the same thing with the garage. Maybe you do 100%, just because you're trying to attract a particular clientele. That's what I think all of our exercise has been, with the architectural looks and the heights and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know that we need to. I don't know that we need to give too much if we're trying to set a precedence here, because it could be, as long as we don't go too far to where people say I can't build it, right? Then it won't come. But boy,
They're saying 3 to 1 for garages?
They're saying
80%.
8/10 of the units should have garages. So if you have 100 units, you've got 80 garages.
Not everybody needs one down there at that place. But I would say that place we was at in Orem, what was that one that we liked so much? Cortland. I'll bet that's 100%.
It sure seemed like it. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Just because I'm done, self-admittedly, my eyes are in. I would like to make a motion, not necessarily that we continue it, but also make a motion that we.
Can we do a public hearing first?
Okay.
Open up a public hearing.
All right.
And continue, and that way the public hearing stays open.
Sweet, I'll do that. But I'll go ahead and, so it's not a formal motion yet, I'll just tell you what my feelings are. I think this should not only be tabled, but I think this should be, that we should move this to a working group and not necessarily table it to another commission. I think it should be moved to a working group. So that's, we'll go into the public hearing, but I think I think it should be moved to a working group and not moved to another commission meeting.
Okay. Last issue that I have, though, I can be real quick, height. If you have an insight there, and I know stories matter with type of construction, different things like that. Our fire department's a little bit concerned. They think about maybe going over 50 feet, for example, because of some ISO things that come into play. Right now, we don't specify a maximum height. And the other thing we don't specify is a maximum density. So those are the last two things that
Notice you have the tied to the general plan in there.
I think.
So I
this is
think
the
we need,
time.
yeah, I think we gotta get there.
Okay. So incidentally, I'm thinking 18 units to the acre.